I call to order this meeting of the Finance Standing Committee at 10:33 a.m. Before we jump right into the agenda, I just want to thank so many of the people here, City Manager Buckland, a bunch of other folks, for making sure we had a very smooth election yesterday. And whoever reset the room, big thanks to you too. I was in here yesterday and it was all set up for voting. So thanks for the quick turnaround.
Mr. Beavers, he was here.
Mr. Beavers did it?
Turned the room around, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Mr. Beavers. With that, roll call vote. Alderwoman Finlayson?
Present.
Alderwoman O'Neill is not present, and Alderman Huntley is present. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Move approval of the agenda from the September 3rd meeting.
No, I mean the agenda, not the minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was approving the minutes. Approval of the agenda as written.
And I'll second that. All those in favor say aye. Aye. And then is there a motion to approve the minutes from the September 3rd meeting?
I'll approve the minutes of the September 3rd.
Second.
Or motion.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Excellent. All right. On to our first supplemental appropriation here. This is SA 726. This is funding to rename our garage from Hillman to Mills Hillman. Does anybody want to come forward and speak on this? I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. The council passed this resolution. We need money to actually do it. I didn't support passing the resolution because I didn't want to spend the money, so I'm not going to support the supplemental appropriation. But
may I ask
a
a question to Mrs. Buckland or Mrs. Moran? Is this amount sufficient to do the job?
Yeah, we have a hard estimate, and this will cover it.
Okay. Then I will make a motion to give this a favorable recommendation.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Nay. Motion does not carry. SA 726 has not received a favorable recommendation.
Mr. Chair, I would like it noted that there was one vote of support. And as we have one member missing, yes, that's a tie vote and no one prevailed. But I would like it noted for the record.
Thank you.
I voted in support.
All right, moving on down the line. I'm excited about this. This is hopefully something that produces money. R3325 speed monitoring system fines. This is a legislation I brought forward that puts our speed monitoring system fines in line with what the state allows. Mainly, it's making them more progressive. So if you, at the moment, somebody who's driving 80 miles an hour in a 30 mile an hour zone is paying the same ticket as somebody who's driving 43 miles an hour. So this would change that. This would set those fines to be more progressive based on how much you go over the speed limit. So, anybody want to speak on it? Anybody got questions?
May I ask
Yeah.
Captain Miguez if she could speak to this?
Yes, Captain Amy Miguez with Annapolis Police Department, Administrative Services Commander. It's exactly as Alderman said. It would bring us in line with the state maximums allowed for those different speeds. We make no recommendation on the fine increase itself.
So the we're going from $40 for first offense and $40 for every additional offense, and then we're increasing those amounts based on the mileage that is they're traveling above.
Faster than the speed limit. So the first increment is still $40 for the fine for about a range of 3 miles per hour of violation. At the first violation, they're still going at least 12 miles over the speed limit just to receive the citation itself at all. So between that 12 and 15 is that still that same 40, and then it goes up from there.
And the chairman said, and you're concurring, that these are the numbers that the state uses in their speed camera. So,
well, they're the maximum allowed fines by the state. So jurisdictions could set lower fines, but they can't set higher fines than these maximum amounts.
So these are the maximum amounts the
Yes,
state
ma'am.
will allow. Mr. Chair, may I ask why we just automatically went to the maximum with there being a range prior to getting to that?
Because I think it's important to keep folks safe, and I think this is a good way to do it. But that I won't say that it's not that it is impossible for us to have some more thought on.
I would, and safety is always the top priority, so please don't misunderstand.
Of course,
But I'm thinking about our residents also. And I don't like anything that appears to be unduly harsh for our residents, all residents.
So when we look back at the past year, about 17 to 20% of citations would fall more than the $40 range. So it's not a significant amount, but it's still, about a fifth.
I'm sorry, I'm not clear. The $40 amount.
Right. So 17 to 20% of the citations that people receive last year
Uh-huh.
would have been for a speed that would be above that $40 amount. So
Okay.
80% would be still $40, basically,
Okay.
if we looked at last year's numbers.
So do we know how many fall into those other ranges?
Well, it's 17 to 20. We didn't break it out by each speed level, but it would be 17 to 20 that are outside of the $40, be above that.
Okay, so the 16 to 19, we bump up to 70. But 20 to 29 bumps up to 120. And then to 30 to 39, $230. And 40 or more, $425. I would like to see how many people actually fall into those ranges. I understand moving the 16 to 19, if that's where the bulk of our infractions fall. I want to be clear that moving the others will have some benefit other than us just making more money. Can we get that information?
Not today.
Pardon me?
Not today.
No,
Yeah.
I know you don't have a magician's hat next to you, so
sometimes it seems like you might.
but I would like to see this. I cannot give this a favorable recommendation without that addition.
Certainly.
I think that somebody tells me it's online.
Is it in the staff report, maybe? Fiscal impact note.
I don't know if finance got a better breakdown than I got.
Yes. It
Yeah,
appears it's in the fiscal impact note here.
Okay, I have it.
Okay.
I have it. Thank you.
Yeah, we had requested a specific number from the company, and they are very responsive when we ask for data. I think finance may have also asked them.
Okay, what I'm looking for at this chart is helpful because it tells us how much money we're going to raise, but it still doesn't tell me how many infractions there are that
Right.
would require such a significant increase.
I think it's that total.
The total what?
The total incidents column here is saying how many were in each one of those ranges. So we had 10,000 that were people speeding by 20 to 20, 10,377.
Okay.
I want us to look at that because I think the data that we got and the data that Captain Miguez got sounds a little bit different. I want to go back and scrub that and make sure we're looking at the same thing and have the same understanding about what the information was that we were given.
Right. I don't think that I got the information that finance got, and I can't remember if I shared exactly what they sent me.
Oh,
Yeah, I'd like to
be
go
fine
back
with
and
postponing this if you want.
I
Yeah.
would be very comfortable with that, and the city manager is going to look at. But this chart does bring to bear some additional questions. So, but I'll wait until we get the rest of the data for them.
Yeah, my other question with this chart, and it could be nothing, but it seems very odd to me that we have so many more incidents in the 20 to 29 mile per hour range
Mm-hmm.
than in all of the other ones combined. It's not impossible or anything. It's just surprising. So yeah, okay. Let's postpone it. I'm sorry. Did you have
I
something to
just
say?
wanted to
Director
add that the data that we received was right from our operator, our Red Speed operator. So we can.
That's
talk-
where I got my data
Okay,
too.
we can look. We have
Sure.
20, from 22 to 24, and this was the
Okay.
24 data. But we
Okay.
can look at it together.
Sure.
Could also be maybe one of you's talking about, maybe you're talking about fiscal year and you're talking about calendar year, maybe? I don't know. It doesn't matter.
I'll have to.
We're going to
look.
postpone it. We're going to postpone it.
It shouldn't
and
make
we'll
that big
figure
of
it
a
out.
difference, but
That's
But we
fine.
should be clear about what time frame the data
Yeah.
refers to. Is it this year, 2025? Is it 2024 collectively? Exactly what do these numbers represent?
and I should also add that these are all current locations. They're
Right.
all places that we
Okay.
have actual cameras at the moment.
Yeah.
Well, I'll ask the other question so we can be prepared the next time. Do we have a breakdown by location? I think that would be helpful.
Yes.
Also, Captain, are there efforts made to slow speed down in these particular areas that are high incident areas? I mean, we can just fine people till no end, or we can do some proactive things that might reduce speed.
Well, that is really Public Works' purview. Traffic
Whose
calming.
purview?
Public Works.
But if I
so,
can answer.
so they do a number of projects. I know they have a project along the Forest Drive corridor to improve safety for the whole corridor, which would involve bringing speed down. We do have 2 cameras out of our 5 on Forest Drive, and you can see over the years the speed does go down, whether that's due to the camera or the addition of lights. You know, we know there's some new communities where lights have been added on Forest, but they're pretty far away from the middle school, which is where those cameras are centered.
But I think, I want to jump in on this. I think it's actually really important to note the money, according to the enabling legislation we passed earlier this year, the funds from speed cameras have to go to reducing speed. They have to go to pedestrian safety, traffic safety. It is earmarked for that. So,
Well, then that raises another question.
Yeah.
And that is what efforts have been made to use those funds, the existing funds, to make those corridors safe.
As of right now, the amount that we collect on an annual basis goes towards the salary piece of monitoring and ticketing. I'm not sure exactly what that involves, but it goes towards the salaries cost.
So it's a requirement of the state law that the funds raised go first to offset the cost of the program, which includes the staff that until October 1st have to be police officers who check those tickets.
Mm-hmm.
The money was never received into the police accounts, but was used by finance to pay those costs in our public safety accounts, which is after those costs are recouped, then any extra money per state law is to go towards public safety and highway safety specifically. So I do have concerns with the current city code needing to be changed because ours also says that it can be used for public transit. I don't know that that
Mm-hmm.
would fall into highway safety. It
And-
goes into the Sustainable Mobility Fund, anything extra per city code. So if we earn more money, that's where it will go.
And highway safety refers to state highway.
So highway can be any road that is traveled on by the public in general. So there are different
Okay.
definitions of highway. Controlled access highway is the most recognizable that most people use it as, but it can also be just any roadway that the public in general travels on.
Looks like there's a lot of moving pieces here.
Yes.
And we don't know who's getting what and where it's going, really.
Well, certainly it hasn't been like a huge amount of revenue. I mean, it's still helpful to offset costs of us running the program, but it hasn't been a huge amount of revenue. If with the proposed camera increases to different locations, plus the proposed increase to the fines, then that maybe become a concern, making sure that the money is going to where it is meant to go.
Yeah.
per state law.
And just I pulled up the city code while we're at it. Our words are solely for the cost of implementing and administering pedestrian safety, road redesign, and public transit. So that feels to me like we're using them to make our roads safer.
Well, and I'm hearing, however, what the state is requiring of us, and I'm not sure they are one and the same.
So earlier in that code piece, it does speak to the state requirement where it says that the costs have to be recouped for the program first.
I think there needs to be some coordination between state law and our city code and things that we've passed. So, and I would hope that going forward, that would be on the agenda of things to codify as we're passing legislation.
Yeah, it was in my plan when I know we're getting to the end of this legislative piece with this council. My plan was then to work on making sure that it aligned with the state law.
Mhm.
I
Well,
think
let's hope you'll still do that.
I think
I will.
yeah, I am. I think all of our goal here is to say we want safer streets, and we want these funds to be directed towards safer streets. So we can make sure that city code, state code, everybody's rowing in the same direction towards that goal. But for now, in the interest of getting all that data in a digestible format, let's postpone this until our next meeting. And Captain Migas, thanks for being here. I always hate to drag you out for something that we don't end up, or that we end up having to bring you back for. But
No, it's all good.
is there a motion to postpone?
I will make a motion to postpone our 3325. And thank you, Captain Miquez. It's important that we have all of the information in order to make sound decisions.
Yes, ma'am.
So
I see Ms. Moran would like to say.
I just wanted to add for the record, we do know where these funds go and we do know how they're used, and nothing has been used outside of the cost of the program, just for clarification.
So does that mean the police department knows? I
No,
mean, it's
it-
funds that's supposed to come back to them, right?
No, it's general fund revenue, but the offset is the police cost for that program.
Who's responsible for the program? The safety program that's supposed to accommodate these fines, the system. Who's to do that? I think it's APD. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, our officers had to approve the citations and deal with any disputes about the tickets and things like that.
And then if there's revenue, APD is responsible for creating the safety program. That's how I was reading it.
It doesn't have to per state law. It just says public safety and highway safety. It used to say pedestrian safety. Now it says highway safety.
So who
Wait,
does
that's-
it? So who does it?
That typically varies by jurisdiction.
I'm talking about it in Annapolis. Who
Yeah,
does it
yeah.
Here?
Here, given and sort of the amount that has been collected primarily goes to the cost of the program itself, and particularly with the expansion. But with both this fine increase and an increase in the number of cameras, that amount will be more. We do keep track of how much that is so that we know. But there hasn't been a lot of decision points necessarily to make about it, given what's there currently. I think part of the point, and this was part of what Captain Miguez was saying, was that in the future, there probably will be more decisions and more discussion to be had. So
we have the sergeant position that was added, which will be funded from the revenue from the citations. And that sergeant is in charge of traffic safety. And they will be responsible for administering and managing the overall speed camera, red light camera, whatever else kind of enforcement cameras that become legal in the future. And so their salary and benefits can be paid to recoup that cost of having that extra position. And then October 1st, probably our camera monitors who are not sworn, but have, I believe, all 3 that we currently have were former police officers. They will be the ones taught to review the citations in the future as part of their duties. They have experience testifying. This is what happens sometimes with the citations. They have to go to court occasionally, but they'd be qualified to do that job. And so part of their salary might also be offset based on the amount of citations they're processing. And then the extra would go to the Sustainable Mobility Fund for those traffic safety projects.
Okay, as long as there's communication between finance and the department, I'm good with it. I trust you to make the right decisions. You know what the code says, you know what state law says. So that's my point exactly. So, Mr. Chair, I will make the motion that we postpone action on R3325
Until the next finance committee meeting.
until the next finance committee.
All right,
Well,
second.
let me ask, can you guys gather the data that we need by the next finance committee?
Oh, definitely.
Okay,
All
then perfect. Thank
All
you.
right. Second, all those in favor of postponing R3325 to the next finance committee meeting say aye.
Aye.
Thank you for being here, Captain.
No problem.
Director Vogel, my friend, how you doing? We're here for R3625, making sidewalks safer. Always happy to talk about sidewalks.
And snow.
And snow. Yeah, well, I don't know that I'd say I'm always happy to talk about snow. I'm always happy to talk about sidewalks. These fees come out of the legislation that we passed earlier this year that said it gave the option for Public Works to clear sidewalks. And I like to say this is sort of the option of last resort. We ideally want what code says you got to clean your own sidewalks, and hopefully, if you're not able to, a neighbor will take care of it for you. If that's not a possibility, there's an option of hiring somebody. But in the case in which our sidewalks are still not safe, we want the option of Public Works being able to go and clear them. And of course, if the city's going to have to pay people to clear them, we need to recoup those funds somehow. So that's what these fees are for. Could either of you speak to how you determined what these fees should be?
Sure, we'll start with introductions. I'm Burr Vogel, Director of Public Works.
Betsy McKeown, Bureau Chief of Engineering and Construction and Public Works.
Thank you. So the question is, hopefully we can agree that putting some kind of fee on this is necessary. The question is, why these fees? How did you guys come up with how much these it will cost the city for each one of these tiers?
I'll just start with kind of a general comment.
Sure.
No, there's really no perfect solution here. So we tried to find something that balances a few factors: fairness, kind of being cost neutral to the city, that we'd be able to recoup most, if not all, of our costs, disincentivize particularly businesses or large, residential property owners from just relying on the city rather than taking care of the things themselves. And then last but not least, it's got to be administratively feasible. Maybe the most fair thing, the perfect solution would be to charge people per feet. But if I said that your side, you just got fined for 47 feet of sidewalk, you might argue with me that, you only have 45 feet, plus just even coming up with that 47-foot number would be a challenge. So what we've proposed here as a structure is something that kind of puts property owners into buckets, and we can then, once we find somebody that we need to recover these costs from, we can do things that way. Betsy came up with all of the details, so I'll turn the mic over to her.
Yes, thank you, Burr. So what I did was I received the sidewalk length data from our GIS folks. So I was able to get per property the sidewalk length from them. And in all honesty, I used AI to help me with this.
I love to hear that. Thank you.
So AI took the data and then lumped it into 4 distinct groups with equal numbers of properties and equal distribution of properties in those 4 groups. So I then I fed it information. I gave it, I assumed 6 inches of snow. I gave it labor rates that I had access to. Now, these are contract labor rates, so that is an overestimation, but I think that's the worst case scenario for this.
Yeah, I think it's good that we actually consider contract rates because our staff will be busy. They're always busy during snowstorms. So that's good. I'd rather have that.
Correct. I agree. Now, where I came up against a dilemma was with those really long sidewalks. So that's why I wanted to add that 5th tier, because I don't want to make this advantageous for those really large properties to just set, because that could be extremely financially burdensome on the city. So that's essentially how I did the analysis. I did round. I also wanted to make sure I included travel time and administrative fees associated. So that's how I came up with these numbers. Do you have any specific questions?
No, I'm going to toot my horn, but mostly give a big shout out to you guys. I'm so proud of how this came together. I think it is the way that legislating should work, to see that we didn't just pass something and assume it'll work. We had this dialogue between the department doing some really awesome research, crunching the numbers, thinking about what's actually feasible. It's just like, I heard this analogy not too long ago about legislating as gardening, and your job is not to plant seeds, but to cultivate as a legislator. And this feels like that. So huge congratulations to you, Betsy, to you, Director Vogel, on making this work in a way that's truly feasible, not just like a mandate from on high. And like I said, it's a little bit of tooting my own horn, but really, I'm very grateful for the work you guys did on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Ms. McEwen, how many cases, in just a ballpark, have we had where we had to hire a contractor to go out and clear sidewalks?
That's really interesting you asked that question, because I was thinking about that this morning. My understanding now, I have worked for the city for 8.5 years. We never had to do anything until last year in my tenure here.
Mm-hmm.
So last year was the first year in my time here. So I don't know what happened before then.
Well,
But last year, it was once. We hired a contractor to clear a number of properties along Forest Drive about 5 days after the big January snowfall. The other properties where the city had sidewalks where the city had to do clearing, we did that with our own crews.
You did that with what?
Our own crews, a mix of rec and parks and public works staff.
So and part of the Forest Drive is my ward. And I know I called because it's a path to school.
Right.
And that's why I'm asking. And I thought Ms. Johnson sent Rex and Park staff out to do part of Newtown. I don't know how far down Forest Drive they went. But do we know, and I know we use the GIS system, can we actually track the owners of some of these properties?
Absolutely.
I know there's a corner on not Bywater, Newtown and Forest, that the owner has been rather, I'll say, elusive. But if we're able through the GIS system, that's awesome.
Yeah, yes. For the most part, we are able to identify owners. That piece that you just mentioned, that one was a difficult one, and I think Burr and I would agree that if we can't figure it out, we'll just clear it.
Correct.
In those situations, and I think that's what we did there. Forest Drive is another problem.
Well, how much does the county weigh in? I mean, Forest Drive is a county road. Do they have any oversight for sidewalks at all?
Yes, it's the county's responsibility.
But they don't. They do not have. They just have not made this kind of a thing a priority. So it's not just Forest Drive; it's throughout the county.
I just wanted to clarify what you said. They have responsibility, but they don't tend to exercise it.
That's correct.
I think what you meant.
Correct. Yeah, they have a small amount. It's a nominal fee, maybe $20 or $25 that they're allowed to cite people. And they just simply don't really implement that as a program throughout the county, not just Forest Drive.
So do we include them in this fines or fees, actually?
They don't really own much of the adjacent property, right? So we're talking about enforcing either county code or city code. It's the enforcement piece that the county doesn't really do. County Public Works does not do. And so the schools, for instance, they do own a lot along Forest Drive and a couple of other roads. The school does do their sidewalk, or did this past time after a little while.
I recall several years ago, there was an effort to eliminate the bus service from the Newtown corridor down to Annapolis Middle. And so I called superintendent of schools, the public works director for the county executive, the mayor, our public works director at the time, and several engineers. And Ms. McEwen, you might have been a part of that group. And all of us came together and we walked from Newtown Drive down to Annapolis Middle so that everyone could see the danger in taking away the bus service for the kids and having everyone experience the path that our students would have to walk. And of course, and the superintendent of schools, how did I forget him? Because he's the one that was going to eliminate the bus service. So they decided to not eliminate the bus service. But part of their concern was property owners who weren't maintaining their properties, and so there's overgrowth on the sidewalk. And the other big concern was, and I share it, is the speed on Forest Drive. You know, that cars just whip by these kids walking down. So anyway, all that to say, the county and the Board of Ed kind of have a role. You know, the Board of Ed doesn't own any of these properties other than the middle school. But do we fine the county when they don't maintain their portion of this? Or is there a discussion about it?
I do think that's a worthwhile question.
So there's, I'm going to repeat something. Go ahead.
I want to broaden it, your question to, if other government entities, the county or the state, not in the county, but to the extent that they own property in the city, are we able to issue these fines on them?
So let's take a county office building.
Right. On West Street. There's
Right. We've never encountered a situation where they don't. They all have good contractors or their own staff. They just take care of it.
Yeah.
But so the county, other than the Board of Ed, doesn't own any property on Forest Drive. It is the adjacent property owner who is responsible. In all cases, it is either private property or the school district who owns the adjacent property on Forest Drive.
And I will note that, you know, the council had reached out to the county council about some of these concerns.
Mm-hmm.
County has actually gone ahead and we got notice yesterday. The list was email distribution list was hidden, but I if you don't have it, you did get it.
We did get it.
That they have introduced some legislation to strengthen their own rules around snow and ice removal. The other thing that I'll note is that the county has recently started that Safe Routes to School program. Eric Lashinsky from the city is participating in that. And part of my request to him was to have some coordination with DPW so that there's some coordination between that Safe Routes to School program and what do we check first if we have a snow event, so that we sort of start there in some sense.
So it sounds like there is some communication and it's a beginning.
And my understanding is if an adjacent property is within the city, we would have the ability to cite them, even if they're adjacent to a county road. Now, the dilemma along Forest Drive is the county clears snow along 5 lanes of roadway, and so that snow gets dumped onto the sidewalk, and it's really challenging for those adjacent homeowners to clear that snow. So I think we're going to probably have to have a conversation about what we're going to do in those scenarios.
Well, and I would hope that a conversation with the county, because they need to know the impact of, you know, their snow removal program. We want them to clear Forest Drive, absolutely. But can we afford to have them dump all the snow on our sidewalks? Because that's a danger for our residents. So just to make them aware, and maybe they can kind of, I don't know, curb their activity. I don't know. But it needs to be a discussion about it.
You make a wonderful point there. The sidewalk situation, for pedestrians and bikes along Forest Drive needs improvement. That is that's a big challenge, but there are areas where it's an easy opportunity. The sidewalks are just simply too close to the road and too narrow. And Annapolis Middle School is the perfect example of that. That could easily be moved 3, 4, 5 feet away from the road and made wider. Currently, maybe 2.5, 3 feet wide. So I believe, working with the county, I know our planning department really advocates strongly for this, is that there's a lot of improvements for the pedestrian infrastructure on the Forest Drive corridor that need to happen.
Thank you.
And
Mr.
then one
Chair,
more piece I wanted to add about the safe route to schools. When we are going through and inspecting after a snow event, we will be focusing on those routes to schools and commercial areas in the downtown area where pedestrian use is highest and most needed.
Thank you. So, Mr. Chair, you preferred a motion to postpone? Is that where we are? I don't recall.
No, I feel perfectly comfortable with passing this today, with making a favorable recommendation. I think I feel like you have coordinated with the county, and I think out of all of these, what I'm hearing is that the coordination with the county, it's not even really a big concern here. It's mostly about private owners of property. But to the extent that we do need to coordinate with the county, it sounds like we've done. So I'd be ready for a favorable recommendation.
Well, I'm comfortable with Ms. McEwen's explanation of how she came to the and I know we don't want this to be, we want this to be a deterrent. We don't want it to be something accessible for residents, so they'll say, well, I'm not going to clean the sidewalks because the city's only going to charge me $200. Vendor will charge me $400, so I'm going to let the city find it, and they'll clear it. So I understand that dilemma. So if this is going to address that, then so I will make a motion that we give a favorable to R3630.
Thank you. I will second that. All those in favor of a favorable recommendation on R3625, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Nobody's opposed. All right, motion carries. Thank you, guys. Really, again, just big congratulations on this one. I know it's not the biggest thing in the world, but I love the way we did it. All right, next up, we got R3925, which is our itinerant merchant sales in the historic district for a flea market. I'm not seeing the person who's applying. I don't suppose we can get Felicia Nolan to come speak on this.
Ask Ms. McClellan if she can.
Yeah, can we put a pin in this? And could you see if Felicia could come over to talk about it? Or maybe Hillary, if Felicia's not available.
Is this legislation just for one person?
It's just, yeah, because anytime there are itinerant merchants in the historic district, they need a resolution. This is someone who approached the city about doing a flea market at Market Space. It's for one, it's a flea market, so there are multiple vendors, but it's one organizer and for one day. So I say let's just push it down the agenda until Felicia can come talk about it.
I agree.
Okay. Then we're just going to move on to 03225 and are we out of order a little bit? 03225 and 03625, which are lease of city property for the spring and fall boat shows from 2031 to 2036. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, these are not in order.
I
Is that
know.
what you just said? So we're going to do 032 and 036 together?
Yeah, I don't see any reason not to. Those are. I thought I had asked that they be grouped together, but either I didn't or the agenda just got a little messed up. But I think it's for the two boat shows. So it makes sense to have them.
I think we heard discussion at the council. I
Right.
think it was the council.
Right.
So I'm comfortable with approving both 032 and 036.
Okay. Let's just. These are big leases. I'd like to get them walked through by our director of central services and without just like jumping right into approval. But so, Mr. Flutter, are you the appropriate person to come speak on this? So, I mean, I have looked through these leases. We've heard from Ms. Ewenson and others about why they need to come forward now, and I've looked at what's in them. But could you kind of walk us through some of the major pieces in these and any potential decision points for the council?
Absolutely. Matt Flinner, Director of Central Services. On leases, I tend to defer to my partner in crime in the Office of Law, Ashley Leonard, who
okay.
is
I didn't see
familiar
Ashley
with the
there.
nuances of those lease terms, but happy to answer any questions that you may have.
How you feeling? You were working on elections. You must have been up late last night, right?
They released me to go home at 5. I was just on call from 5 till
Got it.
whenever.
I hope you got a little more sleep than I did.
Yes, probably. So Ashley Leonard, Assistant City Attorney. The boat show leases are, I would say, substantially similar to the past boat show leases in terms of how long they are, which is sort of an initial term, and then the ability to extend, totaling, I think, between 2031 up to, I think it can go, in theory, through 2040. Yeah. The same sort of rent setup, which is a percentage, either a minimum payment that is slowly escalated up every year, which we don't have an exact number in here because we're going to have to keep, our finance office is going to have to keep escalating it every year. Although we did include language that going forward, we're going to document each year what that escalation is so we can all sort of keep track of that. They haven't paid the minimum payment, I don't believe, in a while. They usually pay the percentage of their gross revenue. They have reporting requirements for you after each show to let you know what went on. We have the same sort of set up inspections and approvals. We have addressed a little bit more clearly how dates will be shifted related to weather or other issues. But otherwise, it's about the same. They're about the same as we've been doing for the past 5-6 years. I forget when the initial ones were.
And can you talk a little bit about how we have these adjusted for City Dock, for the City Dock renovation?
So we do have language in there that they have to work with us to adjust. We have rights to adjust the premises. Of course, depending on how much we adjust it, we also have to adjust the rent, to be fair. We also have language in there that says we're going to work towards post-construction when it's all settled. We can update the exhibits for the premises to reflect the new construction. Since we're doing these early, we had to put a little bit of placeholder language in there just so that as we get through it, we will adjust how things will be set up based on what the city decides as its final plan for City Dock. Since we're going to be the ones driving that design, we have to give a little bit of flexibility at the end of the day to allow them to adjust their premises. But I can't see them expanding, although they're here and they can speak to that. I can't see them expanding much beyond what their current footprint is for either of them.
My next question is going to be to Ms. Ewenson, so if you want to come up and maybe weigh in on that first.
Yeah, you did. That's-
Sorry. Yeah. So I just wanted to kind of get your perspective on what we just heard about from Ms. Leonard on the City Dock renovation.
On the City Dock renovation?
Yeah. I mean, you were saying that it might require these guys to make some changes. And so I wanted to kind of hear, because ultimately that is, I mean, if the city is driving the underlying need for the changes, what those changes would look like are coming from you guys. So I was hoping you could speak to what, if anything, that might look like.
Absolutely. I'm Mary Ewenson, Annapolis Boat Shows. Our offices are located at 110 Compromise Street. I'm actually a resident of the county.
That's okay. We won't hold it against you.
So right now, City Dock is sort of in the middle of the project. Some of the changes that are happening are going to be terrific for the boat shows. The flood mitigation is super important because we have had to make payments to exhibitors and have had insurance claims because of flooding during the shows. We did work with Ashley and other staff to adjust some of the city premises in the leases, actually starting with our current lease. And those will carry through in this new lease. And the important part there was to allow for a little bit of growth in our premises to account for the changes in elevation in the new city dock design. If the design goes through, I know there's a ton of ifs right now, and that's why, as Ashley said, there's some, hey, when we get to that point, to use very strict legal language, when we get to that point, we'll figure it out. But really, we've got a 55-year relationship between the boat shows and the city. And despite the fact that Ashley and I were not involved 55 years ago, we're continuing that really good working relationship. So what we're looking at is if we do have these changes in elevations with ramps and the elevated park, it changes how the move in and move out work, because there will be limited ingress and egress to Susan Campbell Park, which makes the move in and move out time just a little bit longer.
Right.
And so we've worked with Burr, with Matt, with Ashley to make those accommodations, and also to give some just some small changes to the perimeter of the space. That said, anytime we have not needed the extra time or have not needed the extra space, we've given it back to the city as quickly as we can. For example, in this upcoming powerboat show, we usually use all the moorings at St. Mary's Cove for a Brokerage Cove activity. And right now, new boats aren't selling very fast, but brokerage boats are selling so fast that we don't have critical mass to offer that Brokerage Cove. So we made the difficult decision 2 days ago not to use those moorings. And immediately after doing that, we reached out to Tyler and Jacob at the Harbor Master to let them know they are free to lease those. So it's been our experience that we have a very good give and take here. And Ashley worked with us to just work it into the legal document so that as the city dock construction happens, we can adjust as we go along. But the important part to us about the renewal now is that we're investing in new drawings repeatedly. We are taking it on the chin from our exhibitors about, I don't want to move my booth. And so, we're in it for the long haul. So are our exhibitors, so is the city. And this gives us the opportunity to invest in the relationships and the resources and the infrastructure to adjust as we go through these stages. We're really thankful to the city for putting a brakes on the construction for this couple of weeks so we can do fall shows. We know that's a big, heavy lift for the city and for Whiting Turner, but it was the only way we could have the shows and provide the economic impact that we do.
Got it. I do have more questions, but I realized I should have let my colleagues start. So, Alderwoman Finlayson, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very basic question for both you and Ms. Leonard. What obstacles have you experienced in the past as far as the relationship is concerned? I'm comfortable as long as there's collaboration between us and Boat Show. And you guys are the experts, whether it's Boat Show or whether it's legal. So I rely on your expertise to tell me what's lacking in the agreement, or in Miss Mary, I get the last name. You shared with us the reason for the length of the contract, which was significant, because we've gotten a lot of questions about that, but you dispelled any concerns about that. And Ms. Leonard, you too spoke to the length of the contract and why it's important. So my question is back to it. Were there any particular obstacles from past years that needed to be addressed in this new contract? Because it's a very lengthy one.
You want me to go?
You can throw me under the bus if you want to. Mary's very difficult to deal with.
So I've been with the city about 12 years, including changeover in ownership for the boat shows. Mm-hmm. And during all of that time, we've never been able to not reach some sort of resolution and a working relationship, even with various different parties. The parties have all changed out. We did try to do some overhauls in this agreement. First, I restructured it to make it a little bit more, I know it's still very lengthy, but from a legal perspective, more readable. But we bulked up in particular Article 2, which is change in show dates and times, to address when we have to deal with moving dates around a little bit, adjusting move-in and move-out dates. We bulked up a little bit of, Section 1.5, which is revisions to the premises, decide if they need to decrease areas or if we need to do that. And then we also, in particular, bulked up Article number 11, which is the impossibility of performance, but it also includes things, which is like a force majeure hurricane, but we also included language about future city construction, changing in parking management. So I think those were the areas when I saw it that we needed to more clearly address. And the other thing we did is we added more exhibits to more clearly show where each of the multiple lease spaces are. We've always had it in words and we've always had kind of exhibits, but this time we tried to really make sure we had exhibits for each of the different parcels that they're looking at so everybody could be on the same page. And we allowed for those to be updated as needed, so you can just pull out one sheet and put a new sheet in and the same thing with the dates without having to redo the whole lease. You could just shift the exhibits as needed. So that's my perspective.
Yeah, and when we first started working through this, first, as Ashley said, she reordered everything, which made so much more sense. I mean, our attorney was like, oh, thank goodness, because, previously reading the lease was flipping back and forth. But Ashley also had maintained anytime something had gotten a little bit scratchy during the move in or the move out, we deal with a lot of different departments in the city, and Ashley had a really good list of potential places where we'd gotten crosswise. And by crosswise, I don't mean screaming and yelling, just hey, what are we supposed to do here? So we did address most of those things. What was kind of interesting to me through the process is many of the things that Ashley sorted out in the lease, we didn't even realize weren't in the lease because we had sorted them out, directly with Beth and Tyler at the Harbor Master, or directly with Burr and Matt with DPW, or, back with David. So there were a lot of things that were sort of happening kind of automatically because we had worked with each other so much. And as Vicki knows, one of the leases had been rewritten, and we, by force of habit, the city and we did it the way the old lease had happened, which is why we're really glad Matt Flinner is here to be like, hey, remember we changed that. But so I think a lot of this lease, as Ashley said, it's very similar to previously. You can look at the same economic impact and financial and all of that, but she memorialized a lot of things that had already happening that we had already figured out some sort of the sticking points.
Okay, well, thank you to all of you. Mr. Flynn, I didn't mean to leave you out. I was just focusing on those two.
Thank you for the heavy lifting.
But I am very comfortable with the lease, and after the discussion we heard the other night, it's been codified. So, Mr. Chair, I will make
Can I have a couple more questions.
Yeah, we can still have
Okay.
discussion if I make a motion. But
Go ahead.
you go ahead if you
Yeah.
want to ask the questions prior to.
So I don't know that I think this is completely founded, but a question that I get asked by the public is, why are we doing this now? Why not let it wait 6 months? Anybody want to jump in and answer that?
I can tell you from our perspective.
Yeah, that'd be great, Mary.
We actually started asking for it 2 years ago, which I know sounds funny when there's a 10-year lease, and why, when you're 3.5, 4 years into a lease, would you then say, we need to do this again? And the reason is that anytime we need to finance something or make a decision about a very large purchase, we are thinking about, a 5-year, 10-year, 20-year investment. And if it's something that requires us to go to the bank, the very first thing they say is, we will not finance you beyond the terms of your lease. And so at this point, we have 5 years left, about to be 4 years on this lease. If I were to go to the bank and say, I need to spend $100,000 on new floating docks, they'd say, great, we need you to pay that off in less than the 4.5 years left on this lease. So I envision, hopefully it will not be me in 10 years, but somebody will be back here again saying, when we get down to that 5-year mark, we're getting too short again because we have to plan ahead. Like you wouldn't put a 30-year roof on a house that you're only going to be in for 4 more years. And that's, some of our investments are that long.
And I mean, I think we're going to have a similar conversation when we get to the market house lease, which I don't want to jump into right now. But I wonder, Mr. Flinner, if you think, is there a more systematic way we should be going about leases such that to address this sort of general problem of you got to have a lease, be able to get a loan, and yet the council wants to have control. We don't want to be seeding something too far into the future. How do we balance those two competing priorities? Is there a way we can do it more systematically?
Great question. Thank you. To be honest, without Ashley Leonard's help, our real estate would be a disarray, in my opinion. And being new to the city, I've relied on her in the Office of Law heavily to help get all of these projects across the finish line. And I know she's been working very, very hard on all of our leases up for renewal right now. So my observation, what I've been very open about is I really think, and something I'll be asking all of you to consider in December or next budget cycle, is I think the city would really benefit from a real estate team or a real estate individual. We're one point of contact with a background in commercial real estate that can help oversee all of our cities, leases, lessors, lessees, rent payments. I think a lot of things that you'll hear in these different conversations, though, historically, we missed this, or maybe this didn't happen. And I think having one point of contact, one person or a couple people tracking all of this, advocating for it, working closely with all of our partners in real estate, I think that'll help us be really, really organized. Things won't slip through the cracks. We can have more proactive conversations about all of our real estate more often, and that'll be a huge help to the city, in my opinion. Also with things like surveys, appraisals, there's a lot of steps in land acquisition, and we have several new CIP projects right now where we're acquiring new real estate, and that individual or that team could oversee all of that work too. So that's something I'm going to be advocating for next budget year.
May I ask a question, Ms. Leonard? My impression has been that the law department is organized. We know who to go to for contracts and things of the like. And Ms. Leonard, correct me if I'm wrong, you are the point of contact in the law department who deals with all of our contracts and agreements. Am I wrong?
No, I would say I don't know about all, but I would say I have a majority. But I think from my perspective is I have no problem negotiating, drafting, amending, working through problems. But it would be helpful to have a like someone outside the Office of Law who's handling the day-to-day operations. I don't think I have the bandwidth to check that every tenant is making rent payments and submitting their reports, and so it would be helpful to have sort of the counterpart to handle the day-to-day operations that doesn't need like an attorney's immediate, interference. So I think that's sort of the part that has been sort of divided up among various departments. So each department might have a different, leased property, but I could see the advantages of having all of that under one person who's checking to make sure all the tenants paid their rent, making sure they did all their reports, and then being sort of my point of contact with, if there is an issue, a legal issue, then they can sort of tag me in. I think that would be helpful because I don't honestly have the bandwidth to necessarily handle that sort of day-to-day administration for leases.
Well, when we recreated the Department of Central Services, I believe that was one of the considerations. And Mr. Flinner, you have the opportunity to design your department, the department, as is needed. So, maybe this is an effort that you would want to pursue. I can see a collective committee on which there is someone from every department, kind of like our adequate facilities, where everybody's got maybe not that extensive, but something where every department who touches that project has an opportunity to weigh in and make sure that all the standards are met. So, but I think we've gone a little far-fetched on this legislation. Mr. Chair, are you pleased with
Yeah, and so back to your original question from the perspective why we do longer leases, and I'm not going to opine to how long leases should be, but doing annual leases is a heavy lift for staff. Because, for instance, for a boat show, I have to coordinate with OEM, fire marshal, fire department, police department, planning department, harbor master, public works. If I have to coordinate that many departments every year for a lease, it uses up a lot of time. So I personally, I'm okay with longer leases. If we do it right, if we do a good negotiation the first time and getting everyone's input in, and then set it for a couple of years and see how it goes and works. The boat show is, honestly, I'm okay with a longer lease because we've been doing it for so long. We sort of know how things figured out. But 1-year leases, 2-year leases require a lot of effort for a very minimal amount of payoff, in my mind.
Well, I do have to speak in support of the longer leases with this council, because this council brings a certain level of experience. We have a new council coming in a month or 2 months, and they're starting from scratch, at least 5 out of the 9 people. And so there is I think, great value in utilizing the experience from those who are sitting here now, instead of pushing it off to new people who may not, I'll say, have a clue.
Yeah, and might have other priorities.
And well, they'll have all the priorities.
Yeah.
So I think there is a great benefit to utilizing the existing council for our level of experience. So that's my 2 cents worth. I'll make a motion that we give a favorable recommendation to O36. Mr. Chair, are we still doing both of them together?
That's fine. I see no reason not to.
And the other one is O32?
Correct.
Okay, so that's my motion, O32 and O36, in favor of.
Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much for being here, folks.
Thank you.
And yeah, you two don't go away. Well, I mean, you can go back from the table. We're going to jump to this. We're going to jump backwards to the itinerant merchant sales. I'm saying you can go back to your seats. Just don't leave the meeting.
Oh, I thought we were going to mark it out.
No, I want to go back to this itinerant merchant sales that we skipped over.
I'm kind of involved in that anyway, so
Oh,
I'll
okay.
just sit here.
I'm not surprised to hear that. Ms. Raftovich, thank you.
Good morning, Hillary Raftovich, Mayor's Office.
Thank you. So I know the background on this, but could you just give us the explanation for the
Sure.
go to the order? Thank you.
There was this organization, Naptown Flea, worked with the current restaurants that currently lease that space and had planned a flea market in that area. We became aware of this and realized that that was not allowed under the lease for the market space restaurants. So we discussed it with Ashley and with the gentleman who was organizing this, and told him that he would need to come before council for permission to use for the peddlers hawkers permission, because it's in the historic district. It needs to get approved by council. So he canceled the original planned event and rescheduled it for this date in October, and is going through the process, including coming before you for approval.
So there's kind of, as I understand, 3 impediments. We'll call them hurdles. 3 hurdles to clear if they want to do this. One is the lease terms. One is the itinerant merchant sales, and the third is our just general, special events permitting process. So this is only one hurdle, one leg of the stool. But obviously we want to understand the whole picture. So Ms. Leonard, can you speak to what's going on with the lease? Not without getting into, there's a lot more with that lease, but this particular part.
Under the current 5 market space leases, there's five individual ones that all sort of work together. They are allowed to essentially sublease or a sign in limited conditions. One of them includes flea markets. So the hurdles they have to get through is they have to get the merchant approval. They have to submit a special event permit application so we know what's going on. And then the tenants all have to give their support for it. So that's the three pieces we would need. So it is allowed under the leases. It just has conditions to be allowed.
And so, as I understand, this is happening in the space of Federal House, but you're telling me all 5 of those lessees would have to approve it?
Generally speaking, that would be our preference, is because we sort of lease them sort of all, even though they got their own leases, we leased it all together sort of as a working group. You know, we shut down the whole area sort of as a together. So it would be preferred to have support from all of the tenants to do that.
Okay. Yeah, one of...
Mr.
I'm
Chair,
sorry,
may I
go on.
ask
Yeah.
exactly where we're talking about? I'm looking for the specific
Yes.
location.
So the location would be in front of, what are the names of the restaurants now? They've changed them, right? McGarvey's.
Iron Rooster?
And
McGarvey's, Iron Rooster, Federal House.
Fed House, yeah.
And then across is Market House, and Middleton's is around the corner. Those are the 5.
So that whole area where now there sits tables and chairs.
Correct.
Yeah, I don't believe they plan to remove all the tables and chairs. I believe they intend to work with them to have some of that space be for vendors and some to continue with tables and chairs.
Okay.
And it's just for the one day.
Yeah.
So
And my concern with it, though, is I think where I'll just say, put my cards on the table, where I'm feeling with this is I think we should pass the resolution, but I think there's some things to work through the permitting process. And one of those is the timing of it. If this flea market, it makes sense to me to have it happening in the morning, maybe the afternoon, but by 6 o'clock, that's a pretty darn bustling area. And I worry how that will impact some of the other lessees. So I'd like to know that all of the lessees are going to support it.
yes, yeah, we have requested, they have submitted their special events permit, and we have requested a letter of support from the businesses.
From all 5.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. And
Or any affected business, if they're going to stay just in one of the leasees spaces, then I think that would be.
no, what I'm saying is I think even if they're staying in one of the lessees spaces, I think it will have an impact on the other ones.
Okay.
So I would like to see that support from all 5.
I'll make sure that that's in there.
And I don't think this, 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. Okay. Well, if the businesses are okay with it, then I'm okay with it, but I do worry about the timing of that.
Mr. Chair, my question, I guess, has to do with the space that the restaurants are paying for now.
Mm-hmm.
Again, do they remove all their chairs so the trade folks can come in? Or I'm just trying to envision how this is going to set up.
Right. Yes, they would need to stay within the parameters of the existing lease space. And they would need to work with those lessees to decide what I know originally they were in support of it. We did hear from Fed House in particular. That's who they were working with originally.
Mm-hmm.
And they did support the idea, but my understanding was that they would leave a row of tables, so they still had some outside seating during the period of the flea market.
Well, my colleague makes an excellent point about the hours that are being requested, 1 to 6.
Yes.
And I know that would be the height of where there's lots of activity down there. But most of our flea markets in the past, and when we were over on the Donner lot, started in the morning, and we're usually over by mid-afternoon, if I remember correctly.
The
So
farmers
what's
market.
their interest? I know what their overall interest is. But I think there should be some consideration for the starting late and then staying later.
It is on a Sunday, just to point out. So So I think
Yeah.
that that's probably a quieter time, and it's after boat shows are completed.
Mhm.
But it's a football
Well,
Sunday.
It is
Our,
football season.
well, but football is going to be playing
Well,
during this event.
right.
But anyway, I would want to have that discussion with the merchants as long as
Sure.
they're good with it. The other flea markets used to be on Sundays too, if I remember,
Yes.
and they counted on church flow
yes.
after church.
Mhm.
You know, so maybe that's what their target is. My church is over by 11:30. I'm just saying. So anyway, if the merchants or the merchants who have businesses they are comfortable with, I'm comfortable with it, but I want to make sure they're good with it.
So I would like to request Ms. Reuter write us 2 amendments to this. One being that all 5 market space lessees have to sign off, and the other that it be from, I'm flexible on this, but let's say from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. instead of from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m.
Did I hear that you were talking to all 5, but no requirement that they collaborate or?
So originally, when they came to us, they were just working with Federal House. They were only going to be in their space. So I think one of the things we will request from them is an actual plan, a physical plan of what their space would be. And I can add that.
Yeah, I like this. I think it's worth trying it out once. I certainly wouldn't sign off on saying, sure, you can do it forever, but I think it's worth trying out once. But this is obviously a very sensitive area. We've got a lot of stuff going on there. I want to have, frankly, I want us to have control over it. So those are my,
would be a one-time approval.
right. Yeah. So those are my 2 requested amendments. Obviously, coordinating with the permit applicant will be needed for that, but that's where I'm standing on this. And can we
Mr.
make?
Chair, I'll move to postpone action.
Okay, I think that. Well,
on
let's
R39.
just think about it. Are we going to be able to pass it by the right time? Then?
Well,
Like,
we're meeting again in 2 weeks?
so we would meet on the October 8th. We meet on October 1st, October 13th. Okay, so we could do
Is that
that.
adequate time for the vendor to get his vendors lined up? I mean, we're giving him less than a month.
I mean,
That would be, I think, the challenge is that they would need to, I think they're currently, this legislation would be scheduled to come back to the full council at your next meeting,
the 29th.
right?
If we
Which would give them enough time to because
Right.
they can't offer spots to vendors until they have your approval.
I mean, we could make a favorable recommendation with those amendments, even if the amendments are not drafted.
Well, why don't we verbally approve the amendment? Could we hear what the amendments are again?
So you're asking for an amendment to,
Could we have our legal?
oh, I'm sorry.
I mean, I'm not asking you, I don't think we're asking you to wordsmith it precisely right now, Ms. Reuter,
Yeah.
but just repeat back what I said. Is that what you're asking, Mr. Yeah.
Cynthia Reuter, Office of Law Legislative Analyst, and amendment. First part of the amendment, all 5 market lessee, no. The restaurants that are by the 5 parking spots, which would be used by the vendor, the flea market vendor must sign off on the flea market operating in front of their businesses. And then the other part was to limit the flea market to the times 10 a.m. through 3 p.m.
Right now it's 1 p.m. to 6 p.m.,
Right.
so we would change that to be 3 hours earlier.
Ms. Raftovich?
Just to clarify, you did want a letter of support from all 5 members of the market space lease group. Is that correct?
Correct. So
Not
that's
just the
amendment
ones
1.
whose parking spaces they're using.
Correct.
That should be part of the application for the vendor. Okay, with that, Mr. Chair, I will move R39 as with the 2 amendments from the Finance Committee.
Okay. Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, now we're getting to the hot button stuff. 03325 Market House lease. Mr. Flinner, Miss Leonard, how you doing? This has been a big one. I think we've heard a lot about it. We've thought a lot about it. Maybe you want to give us a brief overview, but what I'd really like to hear is, I have some ideas for amendments. I also would like to hear some about let's just start with, can you give us an overview?
So Ashley Leonard, Assistant City Attorney. Currently, the Market House has a lease for the space that has been extended twice at this point. So this would be, instead of continuing to extend the current lease, this would be to do a brand new lease starting July 1st, 2033. The current lease is slated to expire June 30th of 2033. Again, we use the prior lease agreement as the basis and attempted to address any outstanding issues as well as any feedback from the tenants about what they would like to see changed. The term is similar to what we're doing with other leases. However, rather than having continual abilities to extend, this has a more sort of set amount of renewals, which is 3 successive renewal terms of 5 years, which was what was requested by the tenant related to their financing and other operational things. So they might be able to provide more input on the time for that. So would have an initial term for 5 years and additional abilities for 3 successive renewal terms of 5 years each. It is sort of what is the term? Net, where they pay everything. Yes, thank you. Sorry. It is a net zero lease in which they do exclusive control. They're responsible for rent, utilities, various maintenance. There is some maintenance the city has to provide, mostly to the exterior of the building. We did go back and forth on that, and Director Flinner can provide some insight onto that. Rent was based on input from both sides. Current basic rent was started at $8,000 and has escalated up. Given that we're starting this little future out, we bumped it up to $10,000. It would also still have a 5% escalator for each renewal term. So that would not be every annual year, but every 5 years you would get an escalator for 5%. It still does have performance rent. The tenant had asked to adjust that based on, again, growth and financial perspectives from theirs. I think those are the only really big changes. We did also include some language that for some flexibility, where that if the tenant was willing to undertake certain bigger projects, certain different repairs, that we could have some flexibility with sort of offsetting that to payments they would owe. If they took on some of our city responsibilities and funded those, then we could sort of offset or prorate some of the rent they owed, rather than us having to organize and coordinate contractors. And so that is slightly new language.
Such as the roof, would that be an example of one of those larger projects?
It could be. That would be more a discussion between the tenants and Director Flinner as to how they want to maintain it. But yes, the thought was some of the bigger projects, if the tenant was willing to take them on, find the contractors, do the bids, run the project rather than us doing it, we could do it in a more collaborative approach.
Let me ask about the tenants. And you haven't lived through quite as many of these leases with the Market House, but I remember clearly some of the issues, I'll say, in the past of market house leases. And I remember lawsuits and city having to pay significant amounts of money to get out of agreements with certain tenants over the years. And so this organization appears to be functioning well in the market. Now, I don't come downtown other than City Hall, and I miss the market. But on the opportunities when I have been near there, it seems to be a bustling place to go. So tell me what issues there are. And keep in mind, I don't want us to go backwards. I don't want us to go to Site Realty and those other companies that we have major issues with over the years. So tell me why we shouldn't move forward with this agreement, other than the fact that you created it, Ms. Leonard.
Well, I mean, I only created it from a legal perspective, so I don't know if I have final say on that. I will say that this lease was a completely different approach. So I was not here for the earliest lease in like the early 2000s, but I did come in right after the 2012 leases were signed. Mm-hmm. And my understanding, the 2012 leases for short, and I believe the earlier ones were set up differently, in which we sort of carved up the market house and did individual leases to individual tenants in the space. And then we hired or otherwise brought in sort of a third party to sort of manage for us. And that was the setup in both cases. That's not what we did with the current lease or in this new proposed lease. We're giving the whole market space to one person, to one entity. And we're giving them control over how they want to carve up the inside. If they need a property manager, they hire that. We did add in some flexibility so that they can sublease a little bit here and there so that they can try, if they want to bring in a few like approved subtenants to do that. So we gave them a little bit of flexibility in that. But it's a completely different approach versus us having to try to, I would say, micromanage 5 or 6 tenants versus giving it all to one tenant and saying, it's on you. You figure out what works for you operationally and from a business perspective and from a, consumer perspective. And so I think that's why we have seen different results. And from my perspective, it's an easier lease to manage. Trying to manage 6 different tenants who are all in the same space together is very challenging because you end up having to mediate disputes. You have to, weigh different priorities from different tenants. Legally, having to only deal with one tenant is a much simpler and easier format, I think, from my perspective.
And that's good to hear. We did have one tenant some years ago who had his own subcontractors, and that created another challenge for us. And I guess that was 2 contracts previous, or 2 owners, or I don't know what to even call them. But we've gone that route before. This one seems to be more successful.
Well, we've limited how much they can subcontract. So I think the earliest ones, the 2 ones before, they literally carved up the whole thing. This one, it's still, the primary tenant is still running a majority or, a substantial amount of the footprint. So you're not getting as many subcontractors in there to sort of piecemeal the place. So it's a slight difference, but it is a different.
Okay, well, I am good with your comfort level with working with the tenant. If they are living up to the expectation we set out in the lease agreement, and we have had, and maybe this is a question, have there been any major infractions of any sort that would make us pause on this lease?
I have not had to write any default letters, if that's what you're asking. I mean, we did go through COVID, the pandemic, with this lease. So there were some adjustments based on that, but we've pretty much, those adjustments were for a limited time and have sort of settled out. But I have not personally had to be involved in any sort of substantial issues.
Okay. Good to know. Mr. Flinner, have you inherited anything that you'd like to share with us?
I fully agree with everything Ashley shared. I would say I feel like what we're trying to do with this lease, that space and even that part of the city is kind of continuing to evolve, especially in this post-COVID climate we're working in right now. And so we're trying to modernize the lease to help both the city and the tenants operate more effectively in this climate we now find ourselves. I think the only two challenges I would flag, that is an aging facility. It's a historical property. And so, we're trying to work with the tenants to modernize it. Air conditioning is always a challenge there. And we're working through those types of things, which is why we changed some of the terminology in the lease to help the tenants more quickly go out and get funding and make those improvements themselves. The only other thing is I'm working with the Department of Finance just to do a high-level overview of all the financials. We're working on some different things there. Nothing egregious, but we're looking at tax revenue, rent payments, just everything involved on the financial side. And Director Moran and I, now that we both got here, we're just trying to make sure all of that is aligned to lease terminology as well.
Well, let me ask Ms. Moran, are there any issues, financial issues?
We're working on a few things right now, but I will say that they are up to date on their rent and their performance rent for the year, and they do report annually like they're supposed to in the terms of the lease.
So what kind of issues are you working through?
That was my question.
We're not working through any issues per se. We're just Director Flinner and I have been really looking at the lease and the terms of the lease and figuring out are we following exactly as the lease is written. But there's nothing outstanding that the tenant knows is collectible and they aren't collecting, if that's what you're getting at.
I'm not understanding. If they are financially sound, meaning they have no outstanding indebtedness to us, what issues are you having to work out?
I think,
Financial issues. That's correct.
yeah. So and I'll ask you guys to clarify, but having sat through a number of the public hearings, I know that part of the questions that have come up in those contexts that I'm guessing you guys are also just getting from residents is around, are they in fact caught up on their rent and performance rent? Are they in fact applying that correctly to subtenants and things like that, and going through the lease and making sure that we have a really solid grasp of here's all the provisions, here's how you calculate those things, how does that apply to the subtenants. So I think it's more of some of that kind of stuff, but the core, from our perspective, and correct me if this is wrong, but certainly what I've heard from Jody since those questions came up, and I haven't heard anything different from these guys.
I'm sorry, when you said Jody.
I'm sorry, Jody Dickinson, the former finance director.
I just wasn't sure if you meant Dickinson.
Oh,
or
yeah,
Gaddis.
yeah. No, I'm sorry. Is that the leaseholder has been responsive to our requests. There had been, I know, questions, this is part of the reason this came up, questions about how those payments were done during COVID, making sure we're fully beyond that, right? So I think because there had been some questions, I think it's really a matter of going through that and just making sure we really have looked at everything. We've really satisfied that because we know that people are asking questions, that it comes up in the public hearings. I know you guys are getting questions offline. So I think it's really just making sure we've done our due diligence.
I'm happy to give a more specific example. It's
yeah.
one that actually the tenant raised for us, where I guess the reporting requirements that we placed on them in the past were challenging for them to adhere to. And so they asked if we would reconsider kind of how they report their numbers to us, because they would have to go out and contract accountant to basically audit all their financials and get us that information. So that's one thing they raised for us that we're reviewing right now, just to give you a more specific example.
Well, is that something that is doable, solvable, accomplished? The word can't there. But something that you can reach an understanding on in order to get this passed?
I view that more as an operational thing than really a lease, a term. But like Director Moran and I, we're talking, and what kind of financial reporting would they require on their end to justify what they're doing, and then the same for me. So it's just, that's something we're just trying to figure out and try to help out the tenant to the best of our ability.
Well, let me ask Ms. Leonard. She's looking through for the language, I guess.
So we did. So I would preface this as they still have to provide us with numbers and reports. It's just we're going to give them a little bit more flexibility. Again, it's still in our reasonable discretion about what is sufficient. But instead of the old lease required one specific type of audit, instead of requiring that one specific type of audit, we're giving them a little bit of a more flexible approach where they could submit different types of financial numbers that we can review and see are sufficient. Again, we still have the right to say that's not sufficient, we're going to need more from you, but it gives a little bit more flexibility where we can still get sufficient information for our purposes without them necessarily having to contract with a specific type of accountant to do a specific type of audit.
So if we approve this, what's your leverage?
The leverage is there's still language in there that they have to submit sufficient documentation in our discretion to demonstrate their numbers. So if it's not sufficient, then we would say it's not sufficient, we need something more. Otherwise, it would be a default.
But once they have the lease, what's your leverage?
No, that'll be an ongoing requirement. So every year they will have to submit sufficient documentation. It's not a beginning of the lease. It's a regular ongoing thing. And like I said, all we're saying, instead of a specific type of auditing document, you must submit this type of auditing document. It says you must submit sufficient documentation, financial documentation to support your numbers. So it's not saying they can get away with not reporting annually or not providing us with documentation. We're just saying it doesn't necessarily have to be that one particular type of audit. And again, I'm not a financial person, so I don't know the differences between different types of audits, but
my question remains, what's your leverage? If
So-
they don't provide the type of audit that you're asking.
then it's a default because
So
it's
you're in default
a requirement that they have to submit annual reporting numbers.
And I think that should be clear, highlighted.
Yes, it is. The default, it includes having to provide all of this stuff. And there is language in here, and I can't find it right this second, but there is language specifically about how they have to report and what they have to provide. And if they don't, then it is considered a default. So it's written in there.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So am I correct that if this lease is passed, it by itself extends us? Let me ask this in a different way. The current lease goes for another 3 years to 2028 with the option to then renew for 5 more years.
They
Right.
have already exercised the option. So they have exercised the original lease did not put a cap on the number of extensions they could request. So the lease as passed allows for an unspecified number of extensions. So they have requested through 2 different extensions to get them all the way through June 30th of 2033 that have been approved.
And has the city exercised our option too, or is it at their sole discretion?
The way the original lease was written is it was provided that there are no defaults, it's at the tenant's option to extend.
Really?
Yes.
So under what circumstances would the city? Wow, that's kind of crazy.
Well, it's similar. It's the same setup as we do it for a lot of things. Is we have to balance, and I'm not one to not have termination for convenience language in there. But the problem is if you
I'm
put
sorry, you said
termination
for termination for what?
for convenience,
Oh,
which
okay,
means you can
convenience.
just terminate it for any reason. When you do it like that, banks consider it as a 1 year or short lease. If they So you can't, as a tenant, my understanding is you cannot get financing if there's an unlimited termination for convenience, because it essentially makes the lease at most, a 1 year lease. So we have to balance that against city rights. We do have always a right for termination for default. If there are any issues, they're not holding up to any of their requirements and their obligations. And in theory, technically, city council is a governing body. So you could always, and I'm not recommending this because it could end up in other legal issues, but in theory, you guys can act in your own capacity as a governing body. But yeah, so that's from my perspective, I thought it was time we needed a new lease. I think continuing to extend the current lease, I don't think I want to continue from a legal perspective. I don't want to continue a lease that has unlimited extensions. So I would like to start a new lease. This one does not have unlimited extensions, so that at some point it will definitively get back to council.
So then with this new lease, can you walk me through city council passes this, it's coming up on 2038. And is it the same situation that the tenant has the sole discretion to exercise the option?
Well, that wouldn't be an option. So if we pass this lease, a new 5-year term would automatically kick in July 1st, 2033 through June 30th, 2038.
Right.
Then July 1st of 2038 would kick in the first renewal for another 5 years. But they only have, unlike the current lease, which sort of doesn't have a cap on it, it does have a cap of 3 of those 5-year renewals. And then this lease would terminate with no ability to renew or extend, and it would come back.
Right. But my question is, when that potential June 30th, 2038 date is coming up, who makes that determination? Solely the tenant?
It would, by approving this lease, both parties would automatically approve it at this point. There wouldn't be any further action on July 1st, 2038. The action, when you approve this ordinance, the new term, this new lease would take effect unless we undo it.
So
But it wouldn't. It's not a renewal. We're not.
No,
Right.
He's asking about when you get to the first renewal under that.
Oh, the
lease.
first. So the first one would be Then it's written as tenant. If they're not in default, they have the right to renew. So it is a unilateral right on their side unless there's a default. Apologies.
And it's there. I understand what you're saying about a termination for convenience, and I am not an attorney, but when I look at, for instance, our parking contract, there's a difference between the termination for convenience, which could happen at any time, and termination at the end of the 5-year period. I'm just using our parking contract as an example.
You could amend the way that was requested is that the tenants were hoping to get essentially 20 years at their discretion. Renewals don't always operate like that. Sometimes renewals are mutual. Sometimes they're on the part of the city. But the request was for the tenant to essentially have sort of a 20-year term at their discretion without the city having to approve.
That would definitely give me a little more certainty, I guess. Give them less certainty, give us more certainty. Okay, I got some other questions here. Let's talk about the performance rent. The performance rent is changing from 2% to 1%. Am I remember that correctly?
Correct. Yes.
Still above $1 million in gross receipts.
So it would be 1% over $1.5 million.
Well, okay. And is it currently 1?
Let me see. Hold on. I printed it all out, but I know it was 2%. I'm trying to remember if it was.
I mean, is it currently over 1 million?
Yeah, that's what hold on. I was trying to. It's currently 2% over 1.5 million. So the only thing that
Okay.
changed was the percentage.
So why are we decreasing the percentage?
It was a request by the tenant that as they've gotten more successful, they believe and again, they should really respond to this, but my understanding is that the 2% was needed when they were starting up and more struggling and wouldn't be making necessarily as much money. But now they feel like an adjustment in the performance rent is warranted based on how their operations have shifted over the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me to say, as you, the tenant, have more certainty of performance, you want a lower performance rent but a higher base rent. But I'm seeing the base rent only go up by a relatively small amount, while the base rent is going up 25% and the performance rent is decreasing by half. So those two things don't seem totally congruous to me.
Again, I would say the numbers were what were proposed
Right.
and agreed upon. I did not get into the from my role. I don't tend to get into the
Heard.
economic.
Not your role.
Yeah.
Would the finance director like to opine on this?
I share the same questions you have. This was a proposed from the tenant. I think it's very far out to give a quantified impact of those changes. I can give for context. In the current year, it would be that percentage change would be $20,000 lost to the city in performance rent.
So 20,000 for the current year. So losing $20,000, but gaining that 8,000 is per month. So so losing 20,000 but gaining 24,000, but only for this current year. We would expect that gap to grow over time. We would expect the amount that we're losing to grow and the amount we're gaining to not grow.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. That's very helpful. I understand we can't fully project out, but that's good. And that kind of takes me to my second question of, we're talking about this very long-term lease without inflation adjustments. We have the escalator, but it's limited to just 5% every 5 years. That's a 0.8% increase per year. That strikes me as too low. It's lower than what we can reasonably assume inflation. So I would like to see, and maybe what I'm doing here is just proposing an amendment and waiting to hear if anyone objects, that those escalators be at the very least higher to match what we would expect inflation to be. And if not directly written as related to the consumer price index. I don't know if that's something we've done in other leases. But
We have done that with Boat Show. Boat Show is tied to.
So I think that makes sense for both the escalator on the base rent and for the floor, I guess, for the performance rent, that $1.5 million figure. And it seems to me like we ought to adjust at the very beginning of this new lease that floor of the performance rent based on inflation over the last, since the lease was written. So I just throw out a bunch of suggested changes. I wonder if any of you have any response to those. And then as a broader question, as the council has potential changes, how do we're not in a position, the three of us, including Alderwoman O'Neill, to sit across the table from the tenant, but we do clearly, at least I, have some concerns here. How do we go about amending and negotiating in such a way that we don't drive these folks off? Because I do think we have a really good situation going on there. I just want to make sure we get the value for it. So a couple of questions there. First, in the more particular, can anybody respond to those amendments I just threw out?
I mean, I would just jump in and say that that's the prerogative of the council. We're happy to change or amend any terms of the lease that you all recommend and run those by the tenant. So I would welcome all that. I don't have any hardship if you you change the cost of living increase. I agree that's very standard in most real estate leases.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. to
Yeah.
me. So maybe I need to, and so then as a process question, if we have these concerns, we have these things that we think need to change, I can go to Ms. Reuter, I can write an amendment to an ordinance just like anytime, but we also have to recognize this is a negotiation, which the tenant could walk away. So can we get some guidance? This is maybe even a question for Alderwoman Finlayson. How have we dealt with that under previous lease agreements?
I don't think we have, I hate to use the word interfered, but I'm going to use it, interfered with the legal standing for the city. We have entrusted our law department to bring their very best knowledge to help us make these decisions. Going to the bargaining table, I think that ship, I don't want to say it sailed, but we should have had, and for everything, we should weigh in on legislation on what the council wants before there's a contract.
Yeah.
Because that's what bargaining is all about. So I don't know, and I'll ask Ms. Leonard, I mean, how would you feel adding something to the bargaining table at this stage?
Well, Market House has always been a little different because you guys regulate it in your city code.
Mhm.
And the original one went out through a procurement process. So if you have concerns, there's two ways you could do it. One, you could propose exactly what you want the escalator to be and the amounts to be. The other is you could just make a recommendation that you think they're too low and ask for the tenant to come up with some alternatives that they would be comfortable with.
Thank you, Ms. Buxton.
Yeah, so I mean, the market the original lease was not interfered with, but was highly overseen by the city council. Unlike some of the other leases where we do sort of more of a what the market can hold, or we what we're willing to get. The Market House has always been a different scenario, and the city council has always been more involved. I did not finish the original lease because I went out on maternity leave, but I remember there were a lot of meetings with the full city council and the departments and the proposed tenants to negotiate this lease originally. So in that respect, I think with this lease in particular, not that you couldn't do it with any lease, but in this lease in particular, you guys have always played a more active role.
And if I may, I'll add that I remember my first meeting on Market House was my second week with the city. So since mid-April, we've been here having these conversations with each other and with the tenant. So it is a long process. And, based on our lease terms, we're trying to finish things by a certain date. So, I mean, we're happy to reapproach, renegotiate, take whatever action we need to. It just takes some time, a lot of times, to go back and forth and have council review everything. The process itself can be long and challenging.
What's your timeline? Do we have a drop dead date when this has got to be completed?
Before the election?
Which is the November election?
Well, yes, because I mean, technically we could hold this and reintroduce it after the election as a new ordinance. But if this council wants to be the one to approve it, then it would need to be done within the next month-ish.
So in other words, we have a little bit of time, not a lot.
Correct.
But we could give you an opportunity to address those potential negotiations items and come back to the finance
and see if they have any.
Right.
Yep.
To let them know what we're thinking. They have no clue, probably,
Right.
unless they're watching.
They might be.
Okay. Don't put me on this.
Yeah, so we can definitely do that. And then, I mean, I think the goal was to get this approved before the election, but from a time perspective, in theory, they do have a current lease through, June 2033. So
But we have a little bit of time.
Yeah, I mean, that's in your discretion.
Yeah.
The tenants would argue that they would like that approved now from their perspective and financing reasons, I'm sure. But in theory, the lease is not expiring this year.
So, Mr. Chair, I would move that we postpone action on 03325.
That's where I'm going to. I've got a couple more questions still, though.
Okay, we're in discussion. That's it.
Thanks. Yeah, second. So under the current lease, take this out of the equation. We don't pass anything. The tenants can just keep renewing, right? They can just keep going and going and going. So if we do not pass this, the Market House potentially is just for the current tenant as long as they want.
No, so I should clarify. So the current lease has unlimited extensions, but they still require city approval.
Okay.
So unlike
but you just told me they don't need city approval.
No. So the new lease has 3 renewals that can be exercised by the tenant unilaterally. But then once those are up, it's done. The current lease has had a renewal, plus they have this thing called an extension. The renewal was unilateral, but the extension could be done as long as both parties agreed. So the extension had to be approved by the city council, or not the city council, by the city administration. So the extensions didn't bring us back up to city council for approval, but they do still require city administration approval. So it couldn't, yes, in theory, if the administration kept approving them, yes, it could go on for a while.
Right. Okay. Got it. Thank you. That
Yeah,
is
sorry,
a
it's slight.
renewal versus extension that
Yeah.
might have gotten mixed up in my head. Is there a reason we couldn't have under this lease have it be, tell me if I get this wrong, extensions rather than renewals?
No, it's just how it was negotiated. So in theory, I mean, the renewals at the request of the tenants, my understanding was that they wanted 20 years. The only way to get 20 years and to have a little bit of checks and balances is you break it up into renewals that are essentially unilateral, but you add in the caveat about no defaults.
Right.
Versus doing like so that then you don't keep rolling it if there are issues. But you could rework that so that the renewals require a different type of approval that are not unilateral. That would require, or you could do some that are unilateral and some, you could reduce it down to they get maybe 1 or 2 instead of 3 unilateral renewals, and then any further they get maybe 1 extension that requires approval on both sides for an X amount of time.
Right.
What I would personally, from a legal standpoint, is I don't want anything to be unlimited anymore, because that, from a legal perspective, is not the best scenario. So you could shift how the unilateral renewals work, or you can get rid of them, keep them, reduce them. And then if you're going to do an extension that requires both parties to agree, keep that to a set amount of time.
Okay. If this passes, are we, if this passes, can the next administration say that they do not want the 2028 to 2033 lease extension to happen?
Could they renege on the extension? From a legal perspective, because we already approved it and agreed to it, it would be tougher to undo.
Okay. But that's nothing to do with this lease. That's
No,
because the
that would be-
administration has already approved that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think that's good. Just on the accounting part, to what extent is that public information? To what extent is all of this, like how much they have paid the city, how much they're supposed to pay the city, when they paid it, any fees they paid? To what extent is that public information?
So that's all would be sort of governed by the Maryland Public Information Act. Under that, we are allowed to release some things like how much rent was paid and things, but we do have a legal requirement to withhold and keep internal anything that they consider confidential financial information.
Right.
we are not, and that's state law. So state law, we are not, it's not a discretionary, it's not the city may or may not, it's the city cannot release anything that they deem as confidential financial information that could impact them in a financial way with, things. So I can send you that section, but it's state laws that sort of governs what can go out and what has to stay internal.
Okay. Then the last thing I want to talk about here is subleasing. And it sounded like maybe you guys were talking about that when I stepped out briefly. So apologies if I cover something we already did. But the option for the tenants to sublease, can you describe any limitations on that?
Yeah.
And particularly, just to give you context, my concern is if we give this lease and then the tenants say, well, we want to kind of get out of this, we're just going to have basically somebody else totally take it. That's what I want to make sure. So could you describe what limitations, if any, there are?
Sure. That's in paragraph 18, if you want to read it in full. But essentially, they have to get our approval. They have to provide us with a copy of the sublease so that we're aware of it. And any sublease has to comply with the lease as a whole and any and all applicable laws, which could include, permitting requirements, things of those nature.
Let's drill down on that first one. You said they have to get city approval for subleasing. So
Correct. They're allowed to sublease one or more portions of the premises for a term of not longer than, this lease, after first obtaining, in each instance, prior written approval from the city, which would be the city administration or their designate. Any sublease has to be consistent with this lease, including the tenant's business summary as well as city code. They have to provide the city with copies of all subleases as part of the approval. And the tenant is the one who has to, the subtenant has to comply with the laws, but the tenant is also taking it on themselves to make sure that their subtenants are complying with all applicable laws.
No, that satisfies me. I had missed that requirement for them to get approval from the city. That totally satisfies my concern. Thank you. All right. So essentially what I think Alderman Finlayson and I are thinking here is that we want to send you folks back to the bargaining table with the tenant. And what I'm hearing here is that there are a couple different areas to talk about on that.
Can I grab a pen real quick?
Yeah.
I forgot to
Or do you want
I was
mine?
going to put notes on the phone.
Maybe I shouldn't throw pens while we're on camera, but
Just remember, as I'm talking on point number, I've lost track of what I'm talking today. Okay, so continue.
okay. So the couple of places that I think should be areas for negotiation are whether those renewals could be by mutual agreement rather than unilateral.
It's as a sublet.
But no, not the sublets. The sublets we have to approve. I'm saying the renewal on the agreement, as a whole.
Okay.
Whether either the performance rent percentage or the base rent should be increased. If we're decreasing the performance rent, then it seems to me that the base rent should be going up by a higher amount. This is, we're giving you sort of parameters to negotiate on. I'm not saying I'm the expert.
Understood.
And then both the escalator clause, that 5% for each renewal term, and that I'm calling it the performance baseline, $1.5 million, being tagged to inflation. So those are my three kind of parameters. Did you have any others, Alderman Finlayson, that you wanted to?
No, I think you've covered them. I'm sorry we didn't have those amendments when we came in this morning.
No, that's okay.
So, okay, Mr. Chair, so we're going to postpone action on 033 pending the three amendments. Were there only three, Ms. Reuter?
I mean, that might end up having to be more than three, but actual amendments, but it's sort of three areas of amendments.
Those are amendments that'll have to be drafted by Ashley.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll second the motion. All those in favor of postponing 03325 to the next meeting of the Finance Committee, say aye. Aye. Excellent. Thank you. And then, is this Go Bowling Military Bowl Parade, is that time sensitive, or can we just push that off? Because we're already over time and we still have to talk about market space.
Mr. Chair, do you think there's issues with the military bowl?
Well, no, I think we could probably,
I'm comfortable with it. They've been a longstanding
yeah.
partner in the city, so.
Okay.
If I may,
Yeah.
I actually do and have one thing that I want to make sure you guys are aware of. We've been going back to look at how much we've spent. The way that this is framed, it talks about both the parade and the game. But looking into the past, it looks like traditionally those two things have actually been separated, and primarily what has been waived has been costs related to the parade portion, and the game is sort of a different animal in some sense. But as you can imagine, for the last number of years, that amount that's been waived has been $15,000. But of course, the city's costs continue to rise. And based on the information that Finance gathered and Felicia gathered, it does look like the FY25 total that the city spent, because it's framed as up to $15K. Total amount that we spent was closer to about $20K. And I just want you to know that going in case that influences how you feel about it.
So for FY25, will the city be seeking payment of that remaining $5,000?
Yeah, we need to go back and, like I said, the question of the game amount is kind of a different animal. But yeah, we'll be. We've had an initial reach out, and there's some other discussions for us to have. But I just wanted you to know that's what that looks like, in case that makes a difference.
May I ask why the fiscal impact note doesn't reflect that?
Because that is gathering all of that information and putting it in one place is relatively getting updated numbers. We had some estimates prior. We have harder numbers now. That's newer.
I just add that also the fiscal impact note is just based on the way the legislation is written, which is waiving up to 15,000, which is no change from last year's waiving. So there is the legislation, the way it's written, there is no financial impact in the fact that the council is waiving 15,000.
Oh, I don't understand. That is a fiscal impact.
But it's an impact. So in terms of the city, it's less of an impact on the city than it is on the organizer. Right.
Okay. Our intent with the fiscal impact note and the staffing impact is to give us a true picture of what this is going to cost. Not, what we've seen in the past, but we can't calculate future budget if we don't know actuals. So this is not an actual depiction of the cost for the military bowl.
Sorry, as written, it is as written, this would be $15,000 worth of expenses that the city is not recouping. That is the cost to the city.
Who picks up the other 5,000?
Exactly that. The any excess then goes to the organizer. That's where the difference gets felt. It's not on the city side, it's on the organizer side, which is why I just want you to know that's what that looks like.
And so has this information been relayed to the organizer?
Yes, that was, we have some further discussions to go with them, but they are certainly aware that that number is that has grown over time, or is growing over time.
Okay, thank you.
The other question, it sounds like there's really two questions here. One is how do we get the rest of the money, or change it so that it's more? And then the other is, should we break this out by game versus parade? Because I see a real public benefit to parade. I'm not sure how much of a benefit there is to the game.
Yeah, the reason I bring it up only is because the title explicitly mentions the game,
Right.
but that's not how the calculation is done.
Oh, okay.
And
Got it.
I again just want for clarity so you know exactly, right? Because the title mentions the game, but that's not how the calculation's done.
So we should have, at the very least, we should have an amendment on this that takes out the words football, right?
Yeah. And only if you want to, obviously. But I think that would bring those two things into alignment.
Yeah.
Well, that means there's another discussion with the sponsor.
Yeah.
Because this has traditionally been the way it's been handled. So now we're going to separate it out and look at two different numbers as if they're two different events. And I just think everybody needs to be on the same page.
I just wanted to add that we, in theory, bill two different parties for the different events. So the same person that would pay the difference or would reimburse the city for the services that we supply or we provide for the game is not the same as the foundation that is paying for the parade.
So you're saying traditionally it's been broken out into two different bills for two different programs, even though they're back-to-back contiguous?
Well, yes, back to 2019 pre-COVID, there was a separate billing of the games at a set amount. The parade was handled separately and billed to the foundation, net of the $15,000.
And the other amount?
The other amount of the game,
Who gets the $15,000?
the foundation,
The foundation.
towards the parade.
And so who gets the football bill?
The Naval Academy Athletic Association.
Okay. Oh, that should be interesting negotiations. So if it's been separated out, then there's no reason why this shouldn't be separated out also. And especially if by virtue of the fact that it's $5,000 less than what it needs to be.
Yeah. Yeah. If we were actually going to waive the fees for the game too, that's the other chunk of money. So yeah, I mean, I say we give an unfavorable recommendation. That's just where I'm leaning. We went real 180 on that real quick.
Well,
Yeah, that was just to provide some context of, we had asked the same questions when we saw it, although it's no change from the prior year's waiving, just looking at it as a whole of like, are we waiving 50%? Or is the city paying all of it? Just kind of context for you all too.
You know, we've had this discussion before, but I don't recall us having a discussion about two different entities. And I think our colleagues need to be aware of that. So I would suggest we take no action on this there. And it needs to come before the full council when? Preferably on the 29th. Ms. Reuter?
I just want to point out that the language of the military bowl and parade, that is as the foundation requested it to be presented in the resolution.
Is that similar to what their request was in previous years?
It's exactly what it was last year.
And we approved it as it was,
Right.
without finance weighing in on the two separate entities?
Right. So I think that if you were to separate them, it would be a major rewrite of the resolution.
Well, I'm thinking we don't have a lot of choice, especially by virtue of the fact that there's two different organizations. We've got the foundation and we have the Alumni Association.
Right.
We pay both of them an amount. We thought we were paying one amount to the foundation, and now we learn that they're two organizations. So I'm not sure how we would do that in one legislation without specifically stating that. Mr. Chair?
Yeah, I think that we need to do two significant rewrites. I don't see a reason for us to be waiving fees for a football. I mean, maybe there is, but I don't see it. So my suggestion is that this isn't too terribly urgent. I think it could come back to finance. What I'd like to see is that we have two amendments written. One, to strike any mention of the game from that. So it's really about the parade. And the other being to at least get us the information on what the expected cost will be and determine whether we should raise that from $15,000 up to say 20, 25, whatever it actually is, or not. So those are my two requested amendments, and then we have it come back to fine.
Let me ask, would it be easier, simpler, if we simply added the Alumni Association,
Athletic Association, and change the amount to 20,000 as opposed to two separate entities? I'm seeing Ms. Moran shake her head.
The 20,000 that Vicki was speaking on was the cost of just the parade. The police and fire services that we provide, that's the cost to the city, is roughly 20,000
Of just the parade.
Just
for just the parade.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to postpone.
Yeah,
I'm
definitely.
sorry. 'cause
Yeah.
The
there's-
game's a whole nother animal.
So we need to postpone it, and we need two amendments. One, getting rid of everything related to the game, and the second, that brings the cost in line with what the cost actually incurred by the city. Okay. So I'm going to call what you just said motion.
Mr. Chair, I'm not clear on taking everything out about the parade,
No, about the game.
about the game, because we still cover the game. We still have police and fire. We do.
Right, but we're not waiving those fees. They pay us fees currently, right? They pay us fees for doing that.
That's a yes or a no.
They have not been billed for the games 2019. But, and there is no, working with Office of Law, there is no formal agreement of the city bills you X amount for X amount. There's no formal agreement.
All right. Well, then I think we should take out the game part, because if they want to do that, it needs its own separate resolution. It needs to be one for the game specifically and for the athletic association specifically. So that should be, we should take it out of this either way. And then if they want to bring forward a second resolution, fine thing.
Let me ask Ms. Leonard. What do you think?
Generally, I don't like putting two waivers for two different entities in the same document, because it just makes it legally messier. So if we're talking about two different entities, I think they should be getting their own separate resolutions, and unless they're willing to work together. If the foundation is willing to take over ownership for all of it, but it doesn't, as far as I know, my working relationship with them, they are two very distinct separate entities, and they do their own thing. If they want to come together as a united front and put one of them forward as like, that's the person who's doing it, and they are willing to offer that, that's fine. But as it stands now, it seems like they are two separate entities, and I would prefer to have two separate decisions on it.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm comfortable delaying, taking no action until either there's two separate pieces of legislation or there are amendments to this legislation that will delineate the two organizations and the cost.
So, but on this one, if we take no action, it'll come up on the council agenda. So I think we should really postpone it.
It won't come up if we don't automatically go. Okay, then we will postpone action until the next finance committee meeting.
Okay. Second, all those in favor of postponing R4125 to the next finance committee meeting, say aye. Aye. All right. Whew.
Ms. Moran seemed to have something funny.
No, I just wanted to ask for clarification. So is the intention of the resolution for the parade to cover the full cost to where we would not be billing them for any difference?
That's how we do our other parade.
Okay, and I agreed when I saw the legislation, I had a question of, well, why is this one done at a max? What is the difference? So I'm just trying to get some clarity on so we need to have a true cost of what that is. Okay.
Okay.
Hey.
You've been waiting so patiently back there.
I find this very interesting.
So we're on to R3425, which really we need to combine with the ID 13025. Do you want to come up to the table or get Chris? Okay. And we probably need Hillary too. Maybe Matt. You want to pull up a fourth chair? Hey, Kaylin. You got new water.
She's going ahead.
I hope we don't need 5 people. I think we only need 4, right? Am I missing somebody? Okay. Yeah. Yes, this is Marcus Space. That area. Yeah. Him and the other guy, Chris, are both McGarvey's. They both represent McGarvey's. Yeah. They're kind of
They're on the periphery. They don't.
No, they do. Yeah, Marcus. McGarvey's has space.
Right, but minimal compared to the other.
I don't know exactly. Yeah, I guess it is kind of minimal compared, but they're very much like, I would say, the tip of the spear.
You're welcome to take a sit on that. Ashley's here.
Okay.
I think they.
Either way, here you go. Just because you sit in front of a mic doesn't mean you have to speak. Right?
We'll do this instead. Should we do this before or do we have to say that?
Howdy, everybody. This is a fun one. So let's just, whoever is most appropriate, I'm going to guess it's Hillary, start with, where are we with market space? What is the current status, and why would a resolution for interest charges be needed? Some of you were out of the room when I said this. We're combining the general discussion with the discussion on R3425. So the question is, what is the status of market space, and why would an interest charge waiver be needed?
I can speak to the market space lease status. I can't speak to the waiver, the fee waiver part.
Sure. Feel free to break it out.
Okay. So we met again with the concessionaire as well as Medco. And I believe at the last meeting, everyone is in agreement that we would like to see a way for market space lease to go forward. We have submitted a proposal for how we can change the concession agreement to bring it into compliance with that lease going forward. And we are awaiting word from them on whether they would like to take that route or a different route. But I would say that all parties agree that we would like to see market space leases continue.
Well, that's reassuring in the generalist terms. But Ashley, can you maybe take over, give us some more of the legal background, and then talk about this interest charge waiver?
So clarification: the concessionaire is Medco. So,
Right.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So just to clarify, so Medco is the person, is the entity the city has the direct concessionaire agreement with. And then they have subcontractors, which we know as AIR/AMRP, as well as Premium.
Can I ask you something? Is Premium a subcontractor to AMRP or are they a subcontractor to Medco?
Medco, I believe.
Okay. Go on. Sorry, not really related.
So we, under the concession agreement as it's currently written, the market space area is supposed to be under Medco's, is under Medco's purview. So we're working with them to see how they would, what they're comfortable with using it as instead of just straight parking spaces, and what the rate would need to be if that was done. So that might require some adjustments to the lease. As part of that, we have to go through a process under the concession agreement where we put in essentially a city request, which is a written request, which is what we have done, that says, here's our request. This is what we would like to change. These are our proposed amendments to the concession agreement. And then we have to wait. So that's what we're doing. They are actively reviewing it along with a number of other ongoing items under the concession agreement, but it is under active review. And as Hillary indicated, I did not get the impression that they per se care from their operational standpoint one way or the other how the space is used, as long as it's documented formally and it doesn't negatively impact revenue and other operational concerns. So there's not much more we can do other than that. We put in our requests and we will wait and see, and hopefully we will be able to come to some sort of compromise. It will probably be a compromise all the way around, as I know one of the sticking points will be what will be the rent rate. The current leases have it at, I believe, 22?
We're 20.
Yeah. So that there might need to be plausibly some increase from that amount to get sort of a sign off from Medco. So that's the status. Is we put in our requests. We have had conversations with them, but they have a lot of people they have to vet it through. They have bondholders. They have, financial involved institutions that all have to sign off on changes to this agreement. As for the interest charge waiver, we had the current leases do have an interest provision in them for late or unpaid monthly rent. The city did not bill, as far as I believe, and Director Maureen can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we have had some late and some late rent payments and some unpaid rent amounts, but the city never billed or invoiced for the interest related to those amounts. When we got a change in leadership and some people were doing some digging, well, not digging, but doing some due diligence, I would say, it came to the surface that we never billed them for interest. And as sort of I want to say an act of good faith, because I feel like, on the one hand, yes, they might have submitted late payments, and that's not all, this is just a generalization. Some of the tenants might have submitted late payments, but on the other hand, we did not bill for it or proactively seek it. So if we want to continue the relationship, it's one of those things we need to clear up. Either they need to come up to date and pay the interest, or we need to waive it, or they could not pay it, and then we could end the leases in theory. So based on sort of mutual discussions across the board, there was a decision that we would like a continuing working relationship, that we don't think there was a bad faith intent for the late payments or for us to not charge them. And in this one instance, we're willing to waive some of the interest as we proceed forward.
Yeah.
And I just spoke for a lot of people, so if anybody wants to chime in.
That's about, exactly what I was going to say before we jump into questions. Chris, what's your last name?
My name's Chris Hannon, Hannan, and I'm one of the owners of McGarvey's.
I have you saved in my phone as Chris McGarvey's. Mr. Hannon, Is there anything you'd like to add without getting too far down the rabbit hole before we start asking questions?
I guess in terms of the interest charge, I'm assuming we're being polite with, there's 5 individual leases. I don't believe that McGarvey's is behind on interest, or I'm not really sure if we're being specific on this, where we would owe interest. I know that some of the other people of the consortium maybe at times had, under their and previous discussions, said they had problems with proper payments. It wasn't applied right, so on and so forth. But I don't believe we are. I would be surprised, and we're usually the ones in the front. So I think the important part of that would be, it would be nice if we knew exactly, is it all 5, because there are 5 individual leases. But I would say that also goes to the larger issue that we can go on later, which is not all 5 businesses are on equal footing in that consortium, and it is a very, very unique lightning in a bottle that Market Space was able to happen, that 5 businesses were able to account for any number of differences. So I think the interest part or payments, if it's applied to 1 versus all 5, which I believe probably goes more to the fact that this is a unique case. It's not an individual restaurant looking for an individual parklet in front where they can make the financial decision on 2. We're all beholden to each other, essentially, to be able to keep this alive because of the street, and McGarvey's and Middleton's has no parking spaces in front of it to even open a parklet. So we're somewhat dependent upon the financial viability of the people that are involved in that consortium. So we can obviously work out with finance department if there's something that we owe, but I would be highly surprised.
Yeah, real quick, and then let's start asking questions.
What was the money? Like, who didn't pay?
I do not have
Like-
the lease. It is not all 5, as far as
There's-
no. I think it was 2.
2 of the 5 were late or missed payment. Is that what you're saying?
Let's get to this later.
Well,
if you don't
I mean,
mind.
it's
Yeah, I mean, it is not all 5. It's
Okay.
not all 5. I
But-
believe it is, and the ones who I believe have had issues have been notified directly by our finance department.
Sure. Yeah, I wanted to give everybody the opportunity to set the stage on this big, awesome thing we've got going here at Market Space. We'll drill down on some questions. Alderman Finlayson, the floor is yours.
I'm going to ask you to go back a bit.
Yeah. Good.
Okay. When COVID hit, we tried to find a way to allow the businesses to stay in business. And outdoor dining became a very popular avenue for those businesses, considering that we had reduced the capacity on the inside of your restaurant. Now, well, sometime after COVID, and it's not gone, but we saw fit to keep that proposal, that program, to allow seating in Market Space. So my first question, and you kind of just touched on it, how many spaces does each of those 5 restaurants hold? And what is it that they are paying to have those spaces available for their tables and chairs? So
Yes, ma'am. In 2019, the estimate was made that there's 39 total spots in Market Space in that particular corridor. The 5 restaurants took 19 of the 39 spots. So using revenue numbers that were estimate, and Hillary and I just had a little bit of a conversation, but just using the published data from the consultant for the parking agreement, it was about $88,000 is what those spots earned. We doubled that. So we, as a 5 businesses, agreed to pay $160,000 based on 2019 numbers rates.
may I stop you here?
Sure.
That 88,000 is to be evenly shared, or is it prorated?
88,000 is what those 19 spots were estimated to have earned in 2019. The initial agreement for what we went into in 2021 was based on 2019 numbers, but the 5 businesses doubled that number. So our initial rate was about $160,000 between the 5 businesses per year for 19 spots. It's now about $190,000 is what we pay for 19 spots, or about $28.50 per spot.
Right.
And so is everyone paying 1/5 of
No,
that
it's
amount?
proportionate based on, so there's a diagram attached to leases that breaks up the proportionate amount that each tenant is using.
So McGarvey's and Middleton really have no parking.
We have 0 parking spots in front of us, but we have taken the 5 businesses. Again, this is why this is a little bit of a genie in the bottle. 5 businesses collectively out of the limelight agreed to split up the whole area in proportion to what we thought we could service, what's logically in front of you, and then do a proportional rate. The city graciously then agreed to take that 19 spots and build in different proportions to each restaurant, but they're all relatively close. Ironically, Market House has the fewest because they have outside dining on the side of their building. So they ironically have the fewest. I believe if you want an exact, I do have an exact number, so let's not even beat around that. It is, Middleton's has 1,578 square feet. I'm going to do it even more quicker because I know we're not worried about the 70.
How does that compute to spaces?
They wind up taking, if there's a collective, if the collective payment is currently was 190,000, Middleton's paid 32,000, so a little less than 1/6 because they have their own outside dining underneath the canopy. McGarvey's was at 40,000, Iron Rooster was at 40,000, Market House was at 35,000. It's all about, it's essentially equitable. We took the 19 spots, took the effective rate, and then split it up almost 5 ways, but there's a little bit of waiting to account for people that, where do the spots fall? Who's doing that? And in particular, even small things like McGarvey's and Middleton's have to break down their entire area every night, move it out of the way, so that there's a fire lane that's available up Pinckney Street as well for the residents. So we internally try to make adjustments on, okay, you're going to get a little bit more of the overall rent of $190,000 because a little bit more of the space is directly in front of you. Obviously, Iron Rooster has the most space in front of it because it goes lengthwise.
Mm-hmm.
But that's, again, hopefully I'm explaining well that subtly, we all work together to accommodate who can service where can it go, street closures, as well as financial fortitude, I would say.
But there are 2 of you here representing one entity, one restaurant. So the other 4, and I guess the Market House, then we would be responsible for the Market House. So we would be at the table. But why is it that it's solely on you and the others have not even given us the pleasure of a discussion with them?
We did that out of courtesy to make it a little bit clearer. We meet regularly with the other tenants, and it slowly but surely kind of fell on Kevin and my shoulders. And then I started going through all the agreements, trying to do analysis, that it was probably easier. We're all trying to speak as one voice, because if there were 5 voices speaking, it would be really, really hard to understand where someone such as Middleton's might be saying, but I don't even have a parking spot in front of me. So how could I even get a parking spot unless I go in with Federal House? Collectively, we're just here to say we would very much like to continue where we are. We think there's any number of reasons that it's financially viable for everyone who's involved. And more importantly, we were just for the overall goal of the city, and most worldwide cities, is to make more pedestrian zones as to parking zones. That's why we have 1 representing the 5. It would have been a little bit hectic, we believe, but they are in full agreement. We met just last week to keep going over, what are your thoughts? Where do we stand? How does this apply to your business? What do we do in the absence of us coming to a concrete lease moving forward?
So in short, Chris and Kevin have kind of stepped up to be representatives of all 5 of the businesses.
That's correct.
They're all represented here by us.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Let me ask another question about the amount that you're in arrears. How has that been determined? And I think that's already been outlined, but has that been a global perspective to all of the organization? Do they know that there is such a thing as them being in arrears and that they can't be? You know,
This is the first I've heard.
Yeah. Because there are 5 individual leases, the tenants that had specific financial issues were approached directly. We did not approach it as the whole group at this time.
so you guys are at a disadvantage because you didn't know about the other, I want to call them your partners, whether they are or not, their financial situations. In fact, they're in arrears. So it's going to impact all of you.
And so I get the sense here that we don't want to disclose what, maybe it's confidential business information. I don't know. We don't necessarily, it doesn't really matter who it is, frankly. We know it's not McGovern. But my question is, Ms. Leonard, can you explain some more of the circumstances around these late or payments? Was it just a plain old, they didn't pay their bill? Was there some confusion? How did this come to happen?
Director Maureen would have more detail, but I think
Okay, well, we can turn it to her then.
Yes, just to add some clarity. So the way that the lease is written is not the way that the finance department has been billing in the past couple of years. There is interest based on the lease agreement at 5%.
Interest meaning on something not paid.
Late payment.
Yeah.
Rent, monthly rent payment. Each individual business gets a monthly bill and they're supposed to pay it within 30 days. They get an interest charge that's accrued. The way that finance department prior was billing it was adding 1.5% interest for some reason, but it should have been 5. There's confusion on how there are two businesses that have interests that are sitting on their account right now that are in question. One of them, there's a situation where for an entire year they made no rent payments. They were billed just an entire year. They didn't pay. Eventually they came in, made one payment for the principal due, the rent due, cleared their balance off. However, they were still incurring interest in those years. They said they weren't going to pay that. That's still sitting on their account. That's a small amount of this potential interest waiving. It's about $1,500. There's another business that routinely didn't pay their bills on time. They still actively make payments. Well, up until June 30th, everyone was making payments. They were still making payment. They were late on a lot. They weren't paying the correct amount. They were paying to our lockbox instead of paying to the city. The way their payments were applied, there was some confusion. They know how much rent they owe. They owe rent and interest. They owe about $10,000 in rent and then about $11,000 in interest over the span of a couple of years.
And is that at the 1.5 rate or the 5%?
That's at 5%.
Okay.
So they were aware that they were late. They were aware that there were interest charges. They weren't in agreement that they should pay the interest. But there was some confusion on what was being billed as identified in the lease versus how they were making their payments. There was confusion. So
is it the case that anyone paid their bills late, but paid their bills and then paid their interest at the 1.5% rate and is totally caught up at that 1.5% rate, but is not caught up at the 5% rate? Is there anyone in that scenario?
yes, if you went back a couple of years, there were instances where some businesses paid 1.5 because that was what was on their bill and they may have missed a payment by 10 days and then they paid an interest charge. Those are not the ones that we've calculated. That's, it's these two specific instances that are in question.
Yeah. If it was solely a question of we were billing them at 1.5 and we should have been billing them at 5, that seems like that's on us and we should absolutely be waiving that.
Correct.
But what you're describing to me is waiving a bunch of interest on it's the problem is not whether it's 1.5 or 5. The problem is there is interest and the interest is not getting paid. How you're describing. Does that sound correct?
Correct.
And if I may, I feel I'm kind of the genesis of all of this. We had a meeting with all the tenants in late June. That was kind of the first introductory meeting I had with them to kind of introduce myself as their main point of contact on the real estate side with the city. One of the talking points that I presented to all of our tenants was, hey, we're getting ready to do a renewal. We need to make sure no one's in financial arrears. Everyone has to be current on all of their payments. And I remember they all kind of came back and shared feedback with me that they weren't even really sure. They weren't really clear on who owed what they owed. So I went back, worked very closely with Director Moran and the finance team to kind of take stock of all of that. And that's when they discovered the things that she just mentioned. So I was a big proponent of asking to waive that interest since we had both only been with the city 2 or 3 months. We were starting a new business relationship really with all of our tenants. And we didn't really know, and we really couldn't speak to how our predecessors did this in the past. So we were just hoping to start everyone off with a clean slate, sign a new agreement, and then move forward into the future. And that's why we're here today.
Thank you, Beth.
Yeah, Mr. Feiner, I like the thinking, the direction in which you're going. We have tried very hard to help our businesses stay in business. And I'm hearing that some aren't even aware of any arrears.
But they're not in arrears.
They're not in arrears, but
Right.
they're representing the other, whether that's a formal or an informal arrangement. I would like for us to make an effort to sit down. First of all, we have a new chief in town, a new finance director in town. And her way of doing things seemed to be very different from the previous finance director. Good, bad, or indifferent, it's a different approach. And the businesses that do business with us have to learn the procedures and know that Ms. Moran is going to hold them to whatever agreements they've signed with us. But in the interim, I think we should make every effort, and Ms. Leonard, this falls to you as well as Ms. Raftovich, to help them understand their responsibility. And if we have to waive them, I'm good with waiving their back fees, especially when they didn't know that they were supposed to be waiving them. And maybe it was in their agreement and they didn't get it. And that's their fault, but it's partially ours also. So I would hope that we would help our businesses stay in business and, give them one pass. And after that, they get held to the same standard as everybody else. But I hope that we make an effort to help, not to hinder the businesses that are there. We rely on them, and I know they rely on the space that they have, whether it's, a few tables or a lot of tables. They rely on that agreement that they have with us. And we as a city made every effort to help them stay in business through COVID to this new, whatever it is now that we're living through. So I would propose that, I would propose that we support it. But I may be the lone spokesperson. I'm done.
Yeah, I'm torn. Let's pivot back to the sort of general questions about the lease going forward. And maybe it was a mistake to combine these two discussions in hindsight. Talk about the main lease that we're dealing with here. So we have this agreement in principle with premium parking. What happens? First of all, how do we come at that dollar figure that we're going forward with? We, the city, are supposedly going forward with premium on. And what happens if, for whatever reason, these tenants try and walk away? Right? I mean, this has been a lease with the city. It is still governed under a lease with the city, and they have the opportunity to back out of that. So how do we come up with that number, and how do we make sure that it's viable?
So the proposal that we submitted recently was to to bring the parking spaces in line with the current fee for rental of parking spaces, which is $35 per day. We await a response as to whether that's the way that the change will be made in the concession agreement. Once we know what the process will be, what the change will be that will allow these leases to go forward, we could review the actual amount per space. But it's a little hard to get ahead of that when we don't know if they're going to accept the proposed change that we made. They implied that they may have a different way to address it. So once we know how we're going to address it, we'll be in a better position to talk about the final number.
All right, let's say status quo. Nothing happens with premium parking. What are they going to bring a bulldozer out there and push away all the tables? Like what?
Well, it wouldn't be with premium because keep in mind,
Sorry,
premium's
with
the
Medco.
sub
You're right.
contractor. So in effect, there is a provision in the concession agreement that says that if the city directs use of spaces that is under Medco's control, then there's a bag meter fee that either the tenant and or the city has to cover, which is above the rental amount.
So the city will have to pay the
It's an additional charge.
approximately $58 per
Right.
space.
Yes.
And in effect, that would come out of the city's waterfall payment, correct?
Assuming the waterfall continues. If not, it would come directly from,
The general,
From
the
us.
parking fund.
From the general fund.
yes.
Would it be the general fund or the parking fund? Those are
Oh.
better.
Why water?
I don't want to opine as to
Yeah.
which fund it would come out of. But
City funds.
if there is
City
a
funds,
sufficient
sure.
waterfall, then yes, it would come out of the waterfall. If the waterfall is a fluid, but no pun intended, but it's it's a fluid amount. So if there's not enough in the waterfall to cover it, then they would come back to the city directly. We would have to decide what funds to use.
Okay. I just found out Alderman Finlayson needs to run, so we need to take a vote on this resolution, and then can I continue, Ms. Jackson? Can I continue the discussion? No, we don't have a quorum. We can't even have a discussion.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Well, may I ask the timeliness of this?
We hope to have a response from the concessionaire before the next meeting with them, which is in a few weeks.
Before the next finance committee meeting?
No, the next meeting with
AMRP,
AMRP.
who is
Okay.
the representative. Consider them the management company for Medco.
And when is that?
I do not have my phone on me.
It should be in the middle of, before. And we did, when we submitted our proposed change, we did say that that the leases as they stand now would end in October 15th. So we need a response before then. And they seemed on board with that. So we expect to hear from them in the next few weeks.
So that means the next meeting of the finance after 15th? Did you
Is
say?
that when your next meeting is?
The next meeting of the finance committee is October 1st.
Oh, because you meet every time.
Okay, that probably won't be.
I'm
Yes,
happy
we
to
have it.
report back at that time if we've heard anything.
Okay. I want to make sure we we'll take no action on R3425, which is not required.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's good. I want to take just one more minute here, and then I understand you have to go, but just one more minute and turn the floor over to Mr. Hannon to talk about what you see as the steps forward here to allow what I think is one of the most wonderful amenities in our city to keep going forward.
I just spent about an hour with Ms. Ratkovich, so my opinion might have changed slightly. In due deference, we recognize that it's a complex issue a little bit from the way the Hillman parking agreement was written and might not have been written exactly the way the lower end parties may have wanted. So recognizing that, we know that Ms. Leonard, Ms. Ratkovich, they're trying to work to see the best way to make it clean and rectify the situation so that it can continue. The point that I think hopefully that Hillary and I were able to get over is that as complex that side is, our side is almost as equally challenging. Is that we just touched on that briefly. You have 5 businesses that have 5 competing interests, that have 5 different ideas, that have 5 different levels of already outside dining available. So a consideration or recognition that this might not be able to be fit into a larger citywide thing due to the unique circumstances of market space is probably the best way to leave it today, is that it's kind of a unique situation. It's not kind of, it's a really unique situation with 2 businesses having no parklet to do, but also recognizing that we also apparently have members of the team that are in arrears, which makes it a situation where parking rate is of utmost importance.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's great. I'm going to say I think this is clearly not a settled issue, and that I think we ought to explore the council putting together a resolution expressing our intent. And with that, I will adjourn the Finance Committee meeting at 1:23 p.m. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you. And thank you for being patient through every